One or the other. Okay. I would like to call tonight's Committee of the Whole meeting of June 6, 2022 to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is J.D. Patriva, Counselor and Chair of Community Services and Infrastructure Committee. I would like to begin tonight's meeting by reading a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given. And if assistance is required, please see the clerk. Ms. Kirkelos, would you be leading us out on an event of emergency? Wave your hand so everyone knows it's you. Okay, we'll follow Julie. Once you've evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of the town hall. Also, the Town of Lincoln Council meetings are posted on our YouTube channel. All members of council are in attendance in person or remotely. Hello, Councillor McPherson. You're looking a little sunburned, but good anyway. We've got regrets from Councillor Reimer and Councillor Timmers tonight. We also have staff in attendance to speak to their area of expertise, both in person and remotely. Additionally, we have Brenda Orchard from the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators, representatives from MHBC Planning, Urban Design and Landscape Architecture, and representatives from WSP joining us remotely. Are there any declarations of interest for tonight's meeting? I see none. Do members have any amendments to the order of tonight's agenda? Again, I don't see any. So, statutory public meetings, we have none. So, consent agenda. We are now considering item 6, the consent agenda, inclusive of item 6.1, Active Transportation Advisory Committee minutes of April 28th, 2022. Item 6.2, Age-Friendly Advisory Committee minutes of May 5th, 2022. And item 6.3, Green Lane Road Reconstruction Consultation Update, PW 18-22. Would any members of committee like to remove an item from the consent agenda to discuss? There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Russell that all items listed under the heading of consent agenda for Monday, June 6, 2022 be adopted as recommended. Item 6.1, Active Transportation Advisory Committee minutes of April 28, 2022. Item 6.2, Age-Friendly Advisory Committee minutes of May 5th, 2022. And item 6.3, the Green Lane Road Reconstruction Consultation Update, PW 18-22. I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open.
I got nothing here. Yeah.
I'm closing the vote, and that vote carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Devan. So we have one presentation this evening for Community Services and Infrastructure Agenda. We have Brenda Orchard, Board Representative from Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators, Cama, with a presentation regarding the 2022 Cama Collaboration Award, Niagara West Fire and Emergency Services Pilot Project. Please note you have a maximum of 10 minutes. Brenda, please go ahead, and welcome.
Thank you. Well, good evening, Mayor Easton, councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very, very pleased to be here this evening on behalf of the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators to present the City of Lincoln with the Cama Collaboration Award with Municipalities. My name is Brenda Orchard. I'm the CAO for the County of Lennox and Addington in Eastern Ontario. I'm also the Cama Board Representative for the Province of Ontario. It was great to have your CAO, Mike Kirkopoulos, and a number of your other staff and council members in attendance at our virtual awards ceremony on May 18th. So each year, Cama recognizes the value of excellence and professionalism in municipal administration through our annual awards program in 4 areas of program excellence. We look at innovation, environmental leadership and sustainability, professional development, and new this year is the Collaboration Award with external organizations and with municipalities. The awards are presented to local governments and their CAOs in recognition of their creative and successful programs, projects, and services. Our annual awards program has been designed to encourage excellence in the art of professional municipal administration. Success stories are circulated widely to provide Cama members across the country with new ideas that may prove useful for implementation in their own communities. We were really pleased to receive a total of 35 excellent nominations this year. So I would like to share with you the evaluation criteria that the committee uses, because I know you're proud of your staff. I think you'll be extra proud of your staff when you see the criteria that the committee uses. So the committee looks at the extent that the program, project, or service involves innovation, creativity, and exemplifies significant change. They look at its impact on the profession of municipal administration. They look at the potential a program, project, or service possesses to enhance the practices of administrators elsewhere and the degree of the transferability to other local governments. They look at the impact that the program, project, or service has on the municipality and on the organization, even if the innovation itself is not new. They look at the sustainability of the results, the long-lasting positive measurable effects on the success for the organization. They look at the promotion of the overall engagement and/or cooperation. They look at how much you work together to achieve a common goal, the overall impact and quality of the final product, and the demonstrated evidence that all partners contributed to the project. So I think you'll agree that's a long list of criteria to be evaluated against. So congratulations to your staff. So this collaboration award recognizes an exemplary partnership of an innovative, collaborative initiative where the outcome has demonstrated mutual benefits to all partners. And this collaboration must result in one or more of the following outcomes: a significant improvement in the service to both partners, developed a new or improved process, and improved the quality of life for residents. So the award for the collaboration of municipalities as a Cama member municipality partnering with one or more municipalities. I'm very happy to say that this year's winner of the Cama Collaboration Award with Municipalities is the town of Lincoln and the town of Grimsby, recognizing the Niagara West Fire Services Partnership. And your worship, I believe staff have a plaque there that we have provided to you. I hope you display it proudly. There it is. And we also created a video to celebrate the excellent work that your staff did. And I believe your staff had that queued up to play. So I would ask perhaps if the clerk could play the video, please.
Congratulations to the towns of Grimsby and Lincoln in Ontario, winners of the 2022 Cama Collaboration Award between municipalities for their Niagara West Fire and Emergency Services pilot project. Grimsby and Lincoln have embarked on a pilot project to undertake shared fire protection services. A memorandum of understanding came into effect on October 1st, 2021, establishing the Niagara West Fire and Emergency Services. Located in an area that is expected to grow by 200,000 residents per year, the shared fire service allows both municipalities to maximize their collective resources and reduce costs, resulting in administrative efficiencies and additional support for frontline services. It will also help preserve the more cost-effective volunteer fire service model used by both towns. Phase 1 of the project began October 1st, 2021, and is expected to continue for approximately 24 months. A single fire department has been created and a joint advisory committee established. A fire master plan will also be developed. Pending approval from both municipal councils, Phase 2 will proceed to full implementation of the partnership. A working group comprised of team members from both towns was created in 2020 to determine if the adoption of a shared fire service would result in a more efficient, effective, and affordable model of emergency service. It allowed for increased engagement and cooperation. Congratulations to the towns of Grimsby and Lincoln in Ontario. Winners of the 2022 Cama Collaboration Award between Municipalities.
Your Worship, obviously this award is a testament to the creativity and the excellence of your staff. I would also say it takes the support of council. So on behalf of Cama, I would like to thank all of you for showing leadership and really being a role model for other municipalities across the country.
Thank you very much, Brenda. And as chair of the inaugural Niagara West Fire Services Committee, it's a great honor to receive this award. I know our CAO has worked diligently and to be recognized across Canada for this is truly a feather in both our CAO and Mr. Slange from the town of Grimsby. So it's pretty incredible. And we also have a union library that we've just embarked on with Pelham. So of course our joint library board is pandering for this award for next year. So we'll send you some information. So giving you a heads up, so you've got 365 days. So
I might see you next year.
Okay.
So I just want to say congratulations to you, to your CAO, to your fire chief, to everyone, your council. Excellent work, and thank you.
thank you. Your worship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This award is certainly something that both the CAOs should feel very proud of, not just for today, but for tomorrow. There's a great deal of work that needs to be done here. This is a complex process, probably one that many communities wouldn't even think of embarking on, but it speaks volumes to the desire of councils who look that far ahead to establish plans for the future that ensure that they are fit for the future. And this is an excellent example of that. We thank you very much for considering. This is a new, if I recall, a new category, and it certainly is an extra special honor to be the winner and to set an example in its inaugural year. Thank you very, very much. And I want to congratulate our CAO individually on behalf of council for the great contribution that he has made to this effort and to the receiving of this award.
Thanks, Your Worship. Mr. Kakopoulos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and of course, thank you to Madam Mayor for her comments, and Brenda for your attendance and comments this evening. As Brenda said, this is the first ever such award for collaboration, so that in and of itself, I think, is special. And as we heard, CAMA stands for the Association of Municipal Administrators, and CAOs from not only across Niagara, but across the country belong to CAMA, and it's a great organization. First and foremost, I think this award and what we've tried to do really shows that both municipalities can be forward-thinking, can be progressive, can be innovative, and both administrative teams in Lincoln and in Grimsby recognized from the beginning that this project would be a win-win for both municipalities. And so I'd like to thank both councils for their full support from day one. Really, I think, as Brenda said, without council support, we wouldn't be here today, and this project wouldn't be where it is. Like every municipality, we're always looking for innovative approaches to our operations and to service delivery without compromising customer service or public safety, and especially when we think of a joint fire service. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the men and women of both fire services. This really is all about those two fire services and our two fire services. So my sincere thanks to all our firefighters, and especially to Chief Greg Hudson, who's in attendance, who's here virtually, for his leadership. To our joint fire management team that is working closely with Greg, and of course to my colleague Harry Schlang from Grimsby.
Thank you, Mr. Kakopoulos. Do members of committee have any questions? Okay, there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Michalek. The council receive and file as information the following presentation regarding item 7.1.1, 2022 Cama Collaboration Award, Niagara West Fire and Emergency Services, pilot project from Brenda Orchard, Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. I'm now closing the vote. And that carries, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Devan. Okay, we will now get into our report. So we will now consider item 7.2.1, report PW 16-22 regarding Bartlett Road reconstruction design award. Do members of council have any questions? Councilor Majima.
Thank you, Chair Patriva. I want to say I'm really proud of the progress that this initiative has taken. Trucks are really important, obviously, and driving a large truck delivering goods is a tough job. It's a tough industry, and we need to support it. We need to support the needs of the trucking industry and support their need to do their work in a productive manner that is as non-disruptive as possible to all involved. But we also need to support our downtowns and the businesses that have invested in and continue to invest in their businesses and make a go of it within our downtowns. So like many other things, municipal government, we have to take a balanced approach. We know that there are initiatives being considered at the regional level to give trucks a supportive route to travel and to move goods through Niagara, but that's been kind of off and on the front burner for a while. So this council recognized the need to get the ball rolling. And that takes commitment and a lot of background work and also relationship building with the stakeholders. So great job on everyone for moving this as far along as it's come. I'm very happy about that. I'm wondering what our expected completion date is for the detailed design.
Mr. Graham.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, and to the councillor, thank you for the question. What we're looking at is doing the detailed design process. So it's going to be a significant process. It's a large project to work through. We want to ensure we have a robust public consultation component to this project. So what we're looking at is doing detailed design this year and next year. So to be completed in the end of 2023.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Councilor Brunet.
Thank you, Chair Patriva. Through you to either the director or to Walter. Similar to Councillor Injama's comments, I think Bartlett Avenue is a very, very important initiative, very important corridor that we need to get the trucks out of our downtown. My question through you, Chair, obviously we have a lot of work on the horizon over the next number of years. And I have a concern, and I'd just like staff to maybe make a comment. It's great to do the detailed design. It's very important to get these engineering services out there and get the public engagement, and that's great, and that's the first steps. But then there's construction. And so when we look at what we have on the horizon on north-south corridors, Aberdeen, Bartlett, Durham Road, Lincoln Avenue, and Ontario Street with the regional upgrades for the infrastructure for the development. These projects are going to be large projects. I'm just wondering through you, Chair, if we could talk about, I know we're talking about the engineering design, but you know, when people start to see this, they're going to be questioning backlogs and traffic delays. And so how are we looking at staging some of this work as we know it's coming down the pipe?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the councillor, great question. It's top of mind of staff, the project team. We're also in collaboration with the Niagara region. As the councillor said, there is a large project plan for Ontario Street, underground servicing upgrades, another north-south corridor. So we are going to be carefully staging these projects to minimize disruption to the community, make sure that we have, you know, good alternate accesses in place. You know, lack of a better word, we don't want everything ripped up all at once, absolutely. So we are working on a staging plan to align the project staging.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Brunet. Councilor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
You're perfect.
All right. So, couple of questions. Through you to either the finance director or Director Graham, and it's with regards to the expected investment. I would absolutely agree with Councilor Brunet's comment that that when we enter into these analysis of the project, that it does cue certainly our residents to start to think about what is the cost going to be of these projects. And I do know that we did talk about Bartlett in some detail, and I think that at that time, we were looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 million just for Bartlett, and then another, I don't know what it was, 3 million for the corner of King and Mountain or more. And I have no idea where the Durham Road project would land, but I think it's important that we at least get some idea of how we plan to fund these projects. And do we expect that DCs will take on a large part of the cost of these projects? And is there discussion at this point, even though these projects are a few years off, is there discussion about how that looks against our reserves and against any kind of long-term funding to get these projects done?
Director Wagner.
Through you, Chair Petriva, to Councillor McPherson. At the end of the day, these ones, I believe this project's 75% funded by DCs. Obviously, it depends on the cost coming in overall. But with this project or with any capital project, we try to layer them together once we have a better idea of the funding or funding sources required. And through the budget process, we would have a lively discussion with council on funding resources, whether it be from reserves, whether it be from DCs or from the levy. And there we would sit there and prioritize projects. Obviously, as Councillor McPherson just mentioned, we have to consider the sources of funds, our borrowing costs, our debt levels and such, and that we would layer into the overall budget process, which will come up for later this year for 2023.
So thank you, Mr. Director, for that answer. And I appreciate your comments and just looking back at some of the projects that we've done recently. We've seen significant increase in costs coming at us as all municipalities are. So, these projects will be, multi-million-dollar projects, in the tens of millions for these projects. So I think it is important in the planning of this to have an idea today of how these projects are going to be funded, not to be waiting necessarily for the next budget, but to have and understand that we're not able to give, exact dollar amounts, but I think with our experience, I think we can estimate pretty good of what these projects are going to cost and what we are looking at that is left after DCs are paid to get these projects done. Mr. Chair, if I may have another question.
Go ahead. Mr. Wagner's got his hand up, though. I think he's going to respond to that as well. Lawrence, go ahead.
Sure.
Through you, Chair Petriva, to Councillor McPherson. We're already at what council does not know is we're actually starting to take a look at all of our reserves, all of the projects that we've formally committed to, that are partially underway, that are fully underway, or that have potentially been delayed. We want to look at what our available resources are. I expect to have a better, more fulsome update to council before the budget process, but we are looking at all of those. We're looking at the DC threshold or the amounts available. As you know, last year we did the reserve policy and the reserve fund threshold on that premise to make sure that we had a better understanding of what we should have in the bank, what we can fund. I know where our debt levels are and where we'll be in 2 years. Obviously, the challenge for me on that front is the interest borrowing rate costs and the BOC's, Bank of Canada's recent announcements and subsequent expected increases on borrowing, which obviously will increase our debt charges or our interest borrowing costs. But we're looking at that, and I will endeavor to have something in front of council to look at all of those along with all the projects in the pipeline to give council a little bit more comfort of our financial sustainability and where we sit financially.
Very good. Second question through you, Mr. Chair, to the Director of Public Works, and it's with regards to comments that were made, and I'm going to reference both of these projects again, comments that were made that these projects are taking a priority in the capital plan. And that kind of comment does bring some concern to me as to, okay, what is not going to get done, or what is going to get bumped back? You know, making these decisions, you know, without a full review of the capital plan, I think does then present potential surprises that come at budget time. That, oh, you know, when we talked about this particular project, it was in the report that it was going to be brought forth with priority. So now project X is not going to happen in 2023. It's going to happen in 2025 or 2026. So I think that it's in our best interest, again, from a planning standpoint, to have information about how does this affect our capital plan specifically, not just a general, we're bringing this project forward because we think it's the most important project. Well, that may be fine, but it may affect another project that was going to happen in another ward that now all of a sudden is not going to happen. So I wonder if the Director of Public Works could comment on that.
Director Graham?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. I think when we say priority, we're really trying to reinforce that these are important projects. We've populated them in the capital plan for council's review and consideration, as well as we work together on looking at our priorities and at budget as well. We have these projects currently identified in the capital plan. So we have Durham Road planned for next year in 2023 for reconstruction. Again, that's proposed at this point in time until we go through the budget process. In terms of Bartlett Road, we've projected that in the capital plan for potential construction consideration in 2024, 2025, with sort of a vision of a phased approach. But again, there's lots of flexibility on how we want to, implement that. And I think, be lots of further conversations around the table at budget and as we discuss the capital plan with council. So that's where it is right now in the capital plan.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Director. And yeah, I just have an uncomfortable feeling that things will need to be shuffled as a result. I mean, we only have so many resources, both with staff and with monies. So I just would like that feeling to be taken away, but it doesn't sound like that's going to happen before the budget. So to my third question, Mr. Chair, if I can.
Go ahead.
Okay, so in this report, I see that for the two projects, the Durham Road project and the Bartlett project, we are under budget on the Bartlett project and over budget on the Durham Road project. And I see some of the same companies, consultants, in both bids. And I just wonder, question whether or not we would be better to look at this as one project. And I don't know what we weren't privy to the individual bids, but I would look at a $45,000. I think it was $45,000 under budget. Sorry, over budget on the Durham Road. I wonder if we couldn't save that money, if that wasn't a consideration when awarding these two projects individually, as opposed to awarding them to one company.
Director Graham.
Through Mr. Chair, to the councillor, good comment. I mean, I would say that, our approach here is we wanted to keep the projects separate. for flexibility for council in terms of implementation. So we wanted the flexibility that, you know, Durham Road, for example, is a higher priority based on its poor road conditions, and we want to be able to, you know, be flexible enough to move forward with that and not have that project tied to Bartlett Road. So that's kind of why the projects have been approached from a separate perspective, if you will. You know, I know when we went through the RFP process, we did get, you know, good pricing, competitive pricing on the proposals. I can share that with council. You know, so I think, you know, the prices what you're looking at are the prices to do this work through a competitive process. And also too, we do like to provide opportunities for the consulting engineers as well. You know, put work out there, different assignments, opposed to, you know, lumping lots together. So we try and balance that as well, maybe another piece to add. But yeah, in my opinion, that's the approach that we took. Whether if you were to do them all together, whether you get a savings or not, I don't know. I think what we saw in the proposals were good pricing for these assignments. So.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, you know, I have no comment about the pricing. I didn't see any pricing in the report other than the awarded bid pricing, and then the contingency that is on top of that. So we didn't see individual company bids. But I would also, I guess, question whether it sounds to me that these companies, if you were to give it to one company, would only be able to do one project at a time. And I guess I question that as to why these consultant businesses wouldn't be able to work on both projects at the same time to give you the flexibility that you're looking at. So just some comments around the process, and you know, just got me thinking when reading these two reports. You know, was there an opportunity to you know, award, and maybe the bid that came in for Durham Road by the one company that was awarded Bartlett is considerably higher. I can't tell that, but I just wondered if there was an opportunity to save that $45,000 and still have that flexibility. So those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor McPherson. CAO Kirkopoulos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think both the comments from Councilor Brunet and Councilor McPherson, you know, lead me to make a few comments. And I think, you know, first and foremost, I think wanting to get the design phase of this project done is important. We want to be shovel ready, but I think the conversations that we're having amongst senior staff, we're not, you know, the priority on this may change and may change from council input and may change as we look at next term and a potential strategic plan. I think where we were 2 years ago and looking at the priorities and looking at some of the issues we had around truck traffic may be a little bit different now. We put a concerted effort around being very focused on enforcement and, you know, to the tune of when we were getting multiple calls a day, as were many councillors, we had 1,000 trucks going to a site that faced extensive litigation that we've since seen stop. I can tell you that those calls have been limited, and I'm not getting the same number of calls. I think what is a priority early in the term versus late in the term potentially changes. Of course, we're not sure where the region is at in terms of the EA work that they're doing on the Bartlett crossing going on in Grimsby, which is the long-term plan to address some of the issues. And that's not to say we don't want to move trucks out of our downtown, because we do. But I want to put council's mind at ease that I think we want to be shovel ready. We're always looking to maximize potential funding from senior levels of government. So having this ready is key as well. As we kind of head into different phases of a DC background study and look at development charges, those development charges will increase, and they're likely to increase substantially based on the number of projects we include within our DC background study. And I think as a result of that, any of the overages that we do anticipate that are likely going to continue in the foreseeable future, will be covered by that. But again, I do want to put council's mind at ease. We want to be shovel ready, but this may not happen right away. And I think there'll be a time and an opportunity for council as we head into next term to look at where does this fall on a prioritization scale. We've always said our 10-year capital plan is a very fluid document. Things are meant to move on that. And I think as we look at what is a priority, Councillor Brunet highlighted a number of the other roads that are scheduled to happen and that are scheduled on our radar for construction. And so we will go through a prioritization exercise with council.
Thank you, Mr. Karkopoulos. And if you remember too, committee, that we made that pivot a few years ago under Director Graham's leadership, is that rather than doing engineering and construction in the same year, we did the engineering ahead of time. So again, like our CEO Karkopoulos said, it's shovel ready and it's ready to go. And then that gives us the flexibility to pivot and to take advantage of government grants or changes in the marketplace, so or work plans. So, Councillor Michalak, you're next.
Thank you, Chair Patriva. Through you to staff, I just, perhaps to Director Deanne, with regards on the Speak Up Lincoln, truck traffic in Lincoln, what sort of responses have we been receiving in the last, since budget deliberations? How many responses have we received or comments?
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Chair, to the Councillor. Councillor, I actually don't have those numbers right in front of me, but I can get them to you ASAP and get back to you as quickly as possible. But I know there's been a lot of activity on that page. It's one of the most popular, quite frankly.
Okay, that's, okay, I did send an email earlier today requesting that. Unfortunately, I don't have that right now. Another question I have is, I struggled with this project right from day one in terms of what we're hoping to achieve and And I'm concerned that we're not, or we may not achieve the level of satisfaction that we're going to achieve with rerouting trucks. And the numbers with previous tenders that we've put out have been staggering in terms of the excess costs that we've experienced. So similar to what Councillor McPherson had alluded to, like 10 million, I feel as though given our past several tenders, this could be 30% or more or greater. And that is deeply concerning for me. A question I have is, like, similar to what Councillor Brunet said during budget deliberations, what's the ramifications with delaying the feasibility or the study or the what we're trying to achieve tonight? What's the delay with delaying that a year or two?
Director Graham?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. I mean, a couple comments. I think what staff's recommending is we want to invest in developing a good plan, a detailed design. And through the detailed design process, we'll be able to much more accurately quantify the costs of the project. So from our Beansville truck route study that we completed last year, our preliminary estimates for Bartlett Road upgrades are $10 million. I know we talked about that number tonight. Again, that's a preliminary estimate. So what we want to do with the detailed design process is develop that detailed plan, quantify those costs, and look at where we can save costs as well. And that's part of a detailed design process, is you gain a better understanding of what you're working with. And then we look at how we can actually achieve cost savings with the design. So I think by investing in this plan, the detailed design, we'll be able to quantify those costs to council and really give you much more accurate costs on what it's going to cost to upgrade Bartlett Road. I think the other advantage that we have here too is we can look at different phasing options. We'll have a better handle on, how can we phase this in? And I do appreciate what council's saying is a very expensive project. It's a large project. So, through this process, we can develop some implementation options on how we can implement this, either phased or maybe not phased as much, look at those types of options. And I think having a plan that is shovel ready, as our CAO was saying, lines us up a lot better for external funding opportunities. And in general, it's a lot of work just to get through the detailed design process. It is 3 kilometers of roadway. We've got a creek crossing, CN rail crossing, so it is a comprehensive process to get through. You know, so by deferring this, you're just getting further behind in coming up with that plan that we want to do in terms of, and again, just a reminder, a huge key priority for this project is to provide an alternate truck route, but at the same time, we also want to invest in our north-south main corridor for Beansville, which is really important as the community grows, looking into the future, as traffic increases in our community. We do need to look at investing in Bartlett Road as a good, you know, alternate route for traffic in general. You want some redundancy in your transportation network, you know, in the future, if you ever have a problem on Ontario Street, where does all the traffic go? So you do want to have that contingency within your road network as well. So, you know, so there is a big advantage with just preparing, you know, for this north-south corridor for Beansville for traffic management in general.
And I do, through you, I do appreciate that. I'm similar minded to if I want to build a house, I go get a drawing, I get a, you know, a design, and then I go build a house. I don't, you know, this is $400,000 that we're talking about just for a design. And I think to allow that to sit, it could be outdated in 2 years. And this is where I'm kind of going down that road where, you know, unless we're going to actually pull the trigger on this, you know, to spend $400,000 to be shovel ready and hope for grants or hope for funding, it's a big word. So, and I'm not one to count on hope. The other, and what makes me look at this road in particular is when I drive it. I drove it on my way here, and I just don't know if the road is in such terrible condition in relation to other roads within the municipality, both from an active transportation perspective as well as a physical vehicular transportation perspective. The street scans, all this, how does this road compare to other sorts of roads within our municipality?
Director Graham?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. Great questions. And this particular road, I know when we looked at it with our street scan program, it was rated as poor condition overall. There was it is a long section of road. There's one section that's fair to good condition. But again, that's just looking at the pavement surface condition, right? So there are other roads in the community that might be in more rough condition. You know, the pavement is much rougher, potholes, et cetera. But Bartlett Road upgrade is more than just addressing, you know, a poor road surface or a poor pavement. We need to invest in, you know, active transportation, safety. So, you know, one objective, you know, which also aligns with our transportation master plan, is to try and separate pedestrians from that roadway. So, I mean, that's another major driver of upgrading Bartlett Road. Aside from, you know, fixing distressed pavement, we do need to, you know, urbanize this road, if you will. We need to put in curbs, provide a safe sidewalk. Multi-use trail has been envisioned to get people off that roadway. There's a number of drainage improvements and stormwater management works that we need to do on this roadway as well. So it's more than just addressing the pavement condition. There's many more upgrades that make this project important.
I fully appreciate that. I compare it to roads similar within the municipality and what their ratings would be, like 23rd Street from King Street to 2nd Avenue. You know, many people living on that street. You know, what's the active what's the condition of that road relative to this road, Hillside Drive, these sorts of roads that I drive, you know, within the town, and what's the comparative? You know, in terms of which roads should get done when, That's my thinking. And then, through you, one last question through you, you're referencing the infrastructure, you know, the sanitation, the water underground, looking at possibly redoing all of that. What's the ages? Is there an urgent need to do this sort of thing? What's the expected life expectancy? When was, you know, how urgent is it to take care of these things that you've mentioned?
Director Graham?
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair to the councillor. So part of the detailed design process, we definitely, one of the assignments through that process is to closer evaluate the underground infrastructure, to give us a better recommendation to move forward, whether we're replacing it, rehabilitating it, you know, those types of recommendations as we go through the detailed design. But in general, you know, if I kind of break it down by section, the water main on Bartlett Road, sort of from Green Lane to the South Service Road, is old ductile iron water main, so it is a high priority for the town to address. It's reached its life cycle, it's quite deteriorated. There's no water main from Green Lane to John Street, and then from John Street to King Street, there is a PVC water main there. So I believe it's from the 80s, so it'd be probably halfway through its service life. So we'll have to have a closer look at, you know, that system through the detailed design process. I mean, ultimately, what we want to do is when we make a large road investment, reconstruct an entire roadway, we want to make sure the underground servicing is in good shape. We do need to evaluate its life cycles, so we're not digging up new roads in the future when that life cycle of that infrastructure does come due. So we will be evaluating all that. I know for the sanitary sewer system, there are portions from the mid-60s, so it's reaching its life cycle as well. There's another section that's PVC. And again, what we'll try and do is look at, you know, maybe we can do, instead of replacement on some of those pipes, we can do some relining to extend its life cycle. So all that will be evaluated through the detailed design process.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Michalak. And Mr. Deanne?
Thank you, Chair. Just through you to the councillor, and councillor, apologies, I was just forwarded the email that you sent earlier this afternoon. But in terms of an answer to your question in regards to the numbers that we've had visit the Speak Up Lincoln page, since the launch of the project page in September 2021, we've had close to 200 unique visitors visit that page. A lot of them have been repeat visitors, but in terms of unique visitors, it's been about close to 200. Thank you.
Okay, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to add a couple of elements to this. And the main criteria that sent us down the road of looking at an alternative to Bartlett began as our delegations with the province began to weaken. I would say that started last term. The Minister, Carolyn Mulrooney, had heard us once. We didn't get particularly strong reception. The next time we went forward with our colleagues, Grimsby and West Lincoln. And in the meantime, we also had a meeting with Member of Parliament Vance Badaway, who began to outline the priorities and the realities of when 400 series roads are built, and that is the connector that will take place on the north-south road up Bartlett Avenue. There has to be an economic development viability to all of this, and it takes quite a number of years to develop that. So I think they have a system in place for the 400 series highways. It doesn't take much for new businesses to want to move into that arena. But for us to make the same case as we're coming up Bartlett and then up 30 Road into the 20 highway and beyond, that started to become a little bit more of a challenge. So that is something that needs to be taken into account, along with the fact that the region, and Mr. Kirkopoulos, I would ask you to validate this, that they have not begun the process. They haven't tendered the EA process that needs to be done. So there's delay after delay after delay. I think the points that are being brought up here tonight are all substantial and important, and it does require, some of these changes will require us to rework certain elements of this. However, public safety was the only reason that we were going forward with this. We didn't have any other reason. At that time, we weren't talking about the condition of roads. We hadn't even had a discussion on what were our responsibilities. And under those responsibilities, what could we do internally? Why were we waiting all the time for somebody else to get on with their work and not doing anything ourselves? It's been over 40 years since that child was killed on Mountain Street. Since then, there's been other deaths in Grimsby. And it just has become really quite invisible. And so, but I still go back to public safety being the motivator. However, as we learn more and more, we put more technology in place, we learn more about the condition of our systems. The road scan was put in to remove subjectivity from the process. So I think that, you know, when that process tells us essentially which road should be done first, we've made that investment. I suspect that our plan was to pay attention. I've certainly been reminded by constituents in Vineland that underground services shouldn't be the only criteria to decide when roads should be replaced. And I can't disagree with them, because if I look at the condition of Tallman Drive, for example, as a fairly active throughway to 23rd Street, I can certainly understand why people believe that. So the amount of money for the engineering is substantial. So it's but we're not surprised. We have taken a position that we will always attempt to be shovel-ready. We've never been disappointed in taking that position. So I'm going to ask Mr. Chairman if the CAO has any advice for us in terms of how we could, if we approve this evening, which I hope we will, don't want to see this moving back and back and back. We need to take control of what we can control, and this is it. And we have agreed on this, that this is what we can control. What other alternative methods, what methods do we have to restate the priorities so that we can feel comfortable with not only ensuring that this job gets done in a timely manner, but also that it will be in balance with our capital projects that we already know are important and need to be done.
Ms. Kirkopoulos.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think to answer the mayor's first question relative to where the region's at, we are still waiting for the region to do something. And I say that only, and I think they're still working on the terms of reference for the EA. I think one of the things I know all too well is how long it takes to cut into the escarpment. And I don't say that tongue-in-cheek or facetiously. I think this is a long, long project on the horizon when you look at the Bartlett Escarpment Crossing that's going to happen in Grimsby, which is the ultimate solution. Probably something that may be a generation still away. And again, I don't say that to, I think, in any way take council or shy council away from it. And I think what we've done with looking at Bartlett in our own community is look for a solution and look for something that I'm going to call a stopgap, although it's probably a 20-year stopgap, that in a lot of ways is necessary. I think when you look at the activity or the combined activity that we see going on Bartlett, when we look at the industrial expansions, the potential new activity we see there, and even what's happening on Ontario Street, we do need another north-south corridor, and I think there's a number of reasons why staff are looking at it. I think the impetus for it, for sure, was to do something as a stopgap, but I think when we look at what's happening in our community, it still becomes an important project. I think we also know all too well how long it takes to work with CN as an entity and as an agency, and we've seen that on other projects. So as much as we have a timeline associated with that, it may take us 3 or 4 times as long. We may find ourselves still working on the detailed design 2 years from now. and it not going as quickly as I think we want it. So I think from a staff perspective, hearing the comments tonight, hearing Councillor McPherson, Councillor Brunet, a little bit on staging and what's going on, I think we still stand by the fact that continuing with the detailed design work, having this project shovel-ready, having the design work completed is probably an appropriate next step forward. However, I think, as I've said, this isn't a project that I likely anticipate seeing in front of council in 24 or 25. I think it still is a little bit beyond that, pending, again, what we see from senior levels of government, what we see coming down the pipe. There's some other priorities that we have, and I think those priorities likely, when we go through a matrix-type process where we start rating them and putting them in front of council, this maybe falls a little bit further down. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be ready, though, for it.
Thank you. Your worship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. CAO.
Thank you. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not to belabor this any longer, but just again, a couple quick little points. One of the things that we did hear a lot about over the last few months and years from our residents is as we start seeing that buildup of development along the Green Lane corridor, along Ontario Street, is the need to focus on infrastructure. And again, infrastructure means a lot of things to a lot of people. One of the big discussion points that we've had over the last little while is about traffic movement, and again, it's been mentioned tonight, that north-south corridor. I still do think that even as a short-term 20-year gap, I think there still needs to be a lot of discussions with the region about the relationship between Ontario Street and Bartlett, and I think at least having this design completed gives us some time to have those discussions about responsibilities, the movement of trucks either on Ontario and over to Bartlett. But again, having this, again, the CAO mentioned a few times, having it shovel-ready at least shows that we are being as proactive as possible for our residents to be ready as our development starts to creep up. And then we can jump on it. Again, if it is a few years later down the road, that's fine. At least we have this in our back pocket, that we have an option to help alleviate some of that north-south pressure. Because I don't think necessarily Lincoln Avenue is going to be really one of those tangible migration routes. I think you're really going to be struck with Ontario Street, hopefully Bartlett. And even if you can move 20 or 30% of the traffic over to Bartlett, that is a big long-term adjustment and savings for our residents using Ontario in terms of time. So again, my support is there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. And you know, the next project we're going to see is Durham. The reason people aren't using Durham right now is because the sad state of affairs that it's in. So that's why it's going to take precedent over this. And we've got to remember too that, you know, it's a 3-kilometer section of road. So it's a pretty big road. We're doing intersection improvements at the service road at Bartlett and King Street. We're signalizing John Street. There's sanitary sewer. There could be water. So when you break all of those things down, it's not that much in the scope of things, right? Length of the project and the amount of infrastructure work. And like, it's not a simple road, right? It's not just a road, plus the multi-use trail aspect of it, because we've got staff to buy into the complete streets notion, curb, gutter, and they're going to be looking at alternative forms of construction on this to be able to take that extra weight, to be able to take that extra set of traffic and establish another north-south corridor. So, you know, if an accident does happen, there's not traffic gridlock. So it's looking ahead. And you're right, Councillor. Thank you very much. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just in response to some of the comments that the mayor made, you know, I don't know where the rest of the council sits, but, you know, I am certainly supportive of a north-south bypass, and not just for trucks. You know, to me, this is the right thing to do for all vehicles, to take pressure off of Ontario Street. I'm not on board to date on the proposed Mountain Street, King Street changes, because from a safety standpoint, we're not taking trucks out of the downtown. You know, if we want to play that safety card, you know, we've got to look at other options to get those trucks off Mountain Road. And I don't know what the answer to that is, if it's Tufford, if it's Quarry, if it's somebody else, to then get them down Bartlett, because, you know, that's where the risk is at its greatest, is right there in that downtown core. So this is a go for me from the perspective of, this makes sense to take pressure off of Ontario Street, and that's all vehicles. That's not just trucks. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. So I see no further questions. We have a motion moved by Councillor Rinchema to receive and file report PW 16-22 Bartlett Road Reconstruction Design Award for information, and that council approve Associated Engineering Limited to be retained to provide engineering services for $387,310 to complete the detailed design for the Bartlett Road Reconstruction Project, and that council approve the mayor and clerk to sign and seal contract documents on behalf of the municipality. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. And I'm now closing the vote, and that carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We will now consider item 7.2.2, report PW 21-22, the Durham Road Reconstruction Design Award. Do members of committee have any questions? I see none. So there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Brunet to receive and file report PW 17-22, Durham Road Reconstruction Design Award for information, and the council approve RV Anderson Associates Limited to be retained to provide engineering services for $195,620 to complete the detailed design for the Durham Road Reconstruction Project, and that council approve the mayor and clerk to sign and seal the contract documents on behalf of the municipality. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. And I'm now closing the vote, and that vote carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Devan. We will now consider item 7.2.3, repeal and replace the use of parks bylaw PD-32-22. Do members of committee have any questions? And just a word to, or just a query to the clerk's department again. When we have one of these come forward, can we have the changes put in a different color so we know where, or if who's ever putting this report forward, because it's pretty hard to identify the changes when everything is in the same type. So it's come up a few times, and Councillor McPherson identified that last time when we did actually, we went through and we read the bylaws, so there was things that were changed in there that we had missed. So, Councillor McCluck.
Thank you very much, Chair Patrieva, through you to staff. Mike, just curious with regards to beaches, pools, that sort of thing, and how that relates to this bylaw, and specifically with inflatables or assisted swimming devices or this sort of thing. Like, how are they going to be allowed, or are people going to be allowed to use inflatable stand-up boards or that sort of thing, or water wings, or anything for that matter, on a beach, let's say at Charles Daly Park?
Mr. Parkway.
Good evening, through you, Chair, and thank you for the question. The bylaw as it stands right now, in regards to inflatables, there is a section in there, if I can get to it. First off, I'd like to acknowledge and appreciate the suggestion in regards to repeal and replace and highlighting these sections that are to be changed or amended. I will take that information and ensure that that happens moving forward.
Thank you. I think it's section 22 that Councillor Michalak has in question. Section 22, item D, take any inflatable device, swimming assistance device, snorkel, or other underwater breathing device into any body of water unless otherwise prohibited. Correct, Counselor? Is that?
Yes.
Yes.
I believe the wording as it, through your chair, I believe the wording as it stands in there would be reflecting in regards to the pools and not into, say, at Charles Daly going into Lake Ontario.
Okay, because it
Yeah.
says, while in a park, no person shall, so,
Correct.
Well, in a park.
while in a park. Swimming pool, I think, is okay, so no snorkeling in Charles Daly Park.
Or inflatable or that sort of thing.
Mr. Barkway?
I'm just looking for clarification on what people are going to be able and not able to do.
Okay.
Through you, Chair, I believe there should be some clarification there. The inflatables would most likely be referring to the designated waterways such as the splash pad or pools. But Lake Ontario itself, as people would be joining from the waterway itself from boats or coming ashore, they would be using flotation devices or inflatables on the waterway itself. But I'm open to discussion from staff in regards to that as well.
Yeah, and through you, Counselor, too. I mean, we saw that tragic event that happened this weekend, Grand River Conservation Area, where I think it was a father and a daughter were on an inflatable raft that capsized, and they drowned. So, I mean, if it's prohibited, that's some pretty good direction to set out, right?
I'm just seeking clarification on that, similar to those floating rafts like you've mentioned. I mean, they're available everywhere, and they're used at more than just public swimming pools or backyard swimming pools. So just seeking clarification on that. And then another question, if I may, with regards to barbecues. There's a lot written about barbecues in that section as well, that same section. So would you need a burn permit? Do you need a burn permit for a barbecue, or charcoal barbecues? Because when I go through the park currently right now, there's a lot of people barbecuing, and they are barbecuing all over the place. Is that still going to be permitted, or how does that look as it pertains to this bylaw?
Ms. McKay?
Thank you. Through you, Councillor, to Councillor Mikulik, we currently do not allow barbecues in the park. We are looking to have designated permanent grills and designated disposal areas. So we do not, and if they are there, they're asked to not barbecue in the park. They're not permitted, unless they are permitted. And in that case, we do have a pit, as an example, at Bombury Park with the Scouts, that we work closely with the Scouts to comment onto the design and work with fire on that particular pit. But we are looking at designated permanent grills that we would set up. It would be charcoal or briquettes, and then we'd have permanent disposal sites in those parks.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. I didn't know, like, when I'm just only personal observations from walking through the park. I see people barbecuing, like, with charcoal little barbecues, or just even disposable barbecues all over the place. So it's just observations that I've made walking through the park. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mikulik. Yes, Your Worship, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to establish how much public consultation has gone into the preparation of this bylaw.
Through you, Chair, thank you for the question. There has not been any public consultation in regards to the repeal and replacement.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I know that when we were making some changes in the earlier part of this term, in regard to the fire, having fire pits and we talked about fireworks at that time. We've talked about a number of things. The burn permit had extensive consultation, I believe that there's really some, I think there's some real opportunity here to create confusion. I'm not suggesting that these are not all very beneficial to be given consideration, but we don't know, I believe that we don't know what practice is in the community and how surprised people are going to be when they see some of these limitations. If people don't know now that barbecuing is not allowed, your own personal barbecue is not allowed at Charles Daly Park, and it's not being reinforced, then I believe that people must believe that it's okay, and therefore they continue to do it. So what would the limitation on all of this be if we did enter into a public information center to review the elements of this? Otherwise, it appears pretty heavy-handed. That would be my comment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to Mr. Bruder. And isn't, Matt, isn't this just simply taking our updated bylaws and then now turning them over to the park setting and making sure that we do have that cohesive look, because the parks one were outdated, correct?
You read my mind, Mr. Chair. That's exactly where I was going with my commentary. This is really an exercise of updating to some of the new legislation and bylaws that we've currently put in place. One of which, is to now refer to a more recent open air burn bylaw. So really, in terms of it being heavy-handed, we haven't really, like, all of these provisions and practices and regulations have already been in place. This is just to make sure all the verbiage, all the definitions are now up to date. And with respect to people maybe not being aware regarding barbecues and things like that in the park, I know that Mr. Barkway and his team, especially throughout the pandemic, were, and even the security company that we had retained for Charles Daly, were addressing those situations. But I think it's a takeaway maybe from the conversation is that maybe we can work with Director Deanne's group from a communications standpoint to see if we can enhance some of the wording and the education that's out there. Thank you.
I think that's a good idea. Thank you very much, Mr. Bruder. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Mr.
thanks,
Chair.
Your Worship. And Mr. Deanne, and I was thinking the same thing, like, some updated signage at the entrance to the park. Councilor Mikulic's, thing about flotation, maybe over by the lagoon where people might use these things, just to let them know, right? I mean, we can have them on a bylaw, but, to reinforce that right at site, to say these are the do's and don'ts. Mr. Deanne?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And as Director Bruder said, happy to work with both bylaw and community services staff to help inform our residents on these changes.
Excellent. Councilor Rinchema.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to note that wasn't maybe 3 weeks ago, I did have somebody reach out also to ask me if they could barbecue, and that was in Rotary Park. And so I asked Shannon, and Shannon told me that no, you can't. And so the questions are out there. So I think the idea of signage and education is great. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. So, there being no further discussion, Your Worship, you're good? Excellent. I have a motion moved by Councillor Russell. The Council received for information PD 32-22 regarding the repeal and replacement of the use of parks bylaw and approve the use of municipal parks bylaw attached as Appendix A and repeal use of municipal parks bylaw 08-66. I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. I'm now going to close the vote, and that carries, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Devan. We will now consider item 7.2.4, Emergency Deaccession Report, Cider Press CS 08-22. Do members of committee have any questions? There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councilor McPherson to receive for information report CS 08-22, the 2022 Emergency Deaccession Report, and approve the object identified in the report, Cider Press, for deaccession in accordance with the Lincoln Museum and Cultural Center, home of the Jordan Historical Museum of the 20s collections management policy. I will now ask our deputy clerk to call out the vote,
Thank you, Chair.
or
That-
open the vote, sorry, Devan.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. And that vote's now closed, and that carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. There being no additional reports to consider for Community Services and Infrastructure Committee, we will now concluded that portion of tonight's agenda. But before I do rotate to Councillor and Chair Adam Russell, I just want to give a huge shout out to our Deputy Clerk, Devan Kripp, who single-handedly helped Councillor Russell and I with our ideas to put on the first Lincoln's Slow Roll on Saturday. We've got a little firecracker here sitting in front of us who contacted Public Works, who arranged for crossing guards, who made the goodie bags, who got the NRP there. Councillor Russell and I threw out the ideas, and you pulled the trigger. So thank you so much to see all those smiling faces there. Awesome. And you made the goodie bags. So, yes. So, everyone got a bike light, a water bottle, a couple snacks, and shirts. So, hats off. You made it outstanding. So.
Not taking any backseats.
I know. Well, no moss grows under their feet. Councillor Russell, you're up.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the general business and finance portion of the agenda. We are now at 8.1 delegations. There are no registered delegations this evening for the GBNF committee agenda. So we will now consider item 8.2.1, delivering the council's priorities for a future fit Lincoln 2019 to 2022, AD-12-22. Prior to proceeding with the staff presentation, I will ask council to proceed with majority vote to extend the speaking time, which I have a motion moved by Councillor Pachariva that council extends the presentation time until completed. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. And that vote is closed, and that carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. The CAO will provide an overview, and will be having some of his members of the SMT comment with various segments of within the presentation. So, Mr. CAO, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it has been quite a while since I gave a presentation to council up here, so hopefully I'm as good as I remember I was, but maybe I won't. I mean, I had to say something to follow all the kudos Devan and the clerk's team just got there. It's a hard group to follow, especially with you and Councillor Pakshariva. So I will be going through an abbreviated version of the presentation this evening, and really I'll be turning it over to the team that you see both virtually as well as to my left and your right, because it really is them that helps deliver this on a day-to-day basis. I'm just here presenting. It's that team on any given day that is doing the work that you will see in front of you. I think some of the themes you're going to see in this deck really are going to focus on opportunities. You're going to hear, I think, some consistent words as I go through the presentation. You're going to hear about transformative things we've done. You're going to hear about innovation, service delivery, efficiency, and user experience. And I think all those are a testament to council, first and foremost, for the faith you put in us on a regular basis, and for really being the ones that co-created with staff, really for the first time, and frontline staff, when I say staff, not just senior leadership team, this strategic plan. I am pleased to announce that all of council's priorities have been acted upon, either with short-term activities or long-term planning to ensure Lincoln is a community that benefits all. So I will go through the presentation. I'm going to go as quickly as possible through a number of these slides because you've seen much of this. So next slide. A little bit of a summary here. Again, thank you to council for your support as really we create a community that is welcoming, connected, vibrant, and resilient. Next slide. So welcoming community. Pictures here shouldn't be a surprise to any of you, all things that we've collectively been a part of over the last term. And when we think about welcoming community, it's really people, fresh ideas, and businesses. And none of those is more important than the other. They all make up the community that we are. Next slide. So again, I'm not going to read each of these. You see the subject heading there: improving social and economic inclusion, becoming a talent magnet, being a business-friendly environment, having open and transparent governance. And so really I'm going to spend a little time here. I don't want to go through all of these because I've asked each member of SMT at the end of my presentation to share what they're most proud of. So I think they're going to talk to you about which of the items here that they're the most proud of. As you can see, we've highlighted some of the more important ones that we've been able to achieve. And I say important, and I should really take that back because I think they're all important, but some of the ones that we thought we'd want to bring to council's attention. So 3 I'll highlight there, but not in great detail. Of course, Prokich and Rotary Park, 2 amazing assets in our community. Accessibility, and we're hearing more and more about that in our community and around our community. Of course, transit and the importance of transit in all various elements. And our diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. Next slide. A couple of the items here, again, you're going to hear from Director Deanne, who probably touches upon the Youth Skills Studio. I'm going to highlight it as well and say almost $5 million. Council talked about youth, you talked about jobs, you talked about retraining. I don't think in our wildest dreams collectively we all thought we would be fortunate enough to have a Youth Skills Studio that not only supports Lincoln youth, but also youth from across Niagara. The Agritech Hackathon, again, something that was a first that we never did. We always talked about technology and being a digital organization, and we know our agricultural history and our agricultural roots, combining those and really creating an Agritech Hackathon, which is Ontario's first, also something that's vitally important. And of course, supporting our industrial and rural partners. We talk about having a balanced and diversified economy. When we say those things, what does that mean? That means not only having residential growth, but it also means having industrial and commercial growth. And part of that commercial growth happens when we support our farming community and when we support our rural areas. Next slide. I mean, this slide here really does touch upon that business-friendly environment. Again, I'm not going to get into all of these I think the one word that sticks out here and that sticks out throughout the presentation is collaboration. So working with the numbers and the various agencies that we have here, both BIAs to our museum and recreational and tourism programming, our subcommittees, looking at things we do in terms of reviews and studies and engagement, all things really that I think touch upon that collaboration with local business. Next slide. Open and transparent governance. I think we often hear a lot about open and transparent governance. What does that mean? How do we engage? I would say most of all, enhancing what we've already been doing. Last term, we put a very concerted effort on engaging with our residents, sharing information, hearing ideas, informing them. I always say there's often a spectrum of engagement. Everything from informing folks is on one side to engaging them in decision-making, and there's a number of things that I think fall across that. So really open and transparent government is a combination of all the things we do here. Speak Up Lincoln, that you'll hear about a little later, really has been a tool that this council supported and really pushed and has really made a difference. Next slide. Our next theme area is around a connected community. So in other words, to connect all of Lincoln, people, places, and natural landscapes. Again, I'm not going to go into each of these areas. 2.1, expanded cultural and community initiatives. 2.2, integrated mobility and active transportation. And we just heard a great example of active transportation. 2.3, balanced and diversified housing options. And 2.4, intergovernmental leadership. So when I look at this slide and I look at some of the things that we've been able to deliver on in this particular area, I think about our museum and cultural center, the exhibitions. I mean, this is I'm going to say a national treasure. I'm going to say it's a world-class site, and I think when Shannon speaks to this in terms of what her and her team have been able to do, you'll see why I say that. The MOU for the acquisition of Beamsville District Secondary School is something that will become a priority for us into next term, and you'll hear more about that. Councillor Pachariva highlighted the successful merger, the union of the Lincoln and Pelham Public Libraries, and again, looking at shared services. And of course, the Heritage Conservation District study and the work going on there that Director Bruder will highlight in a little bit. Next slide. When we think about mobility, active transportation, again, a number of examples here. I think the theme really that is interspersed here is really looking at how we prepare for the future. Things that maybe aren't coming right now. I think about the IBC, the initial business case for Beamsville Go, and what that potentially looks like. I heard loud and clear from council on numerous occasions looking at technology, looking at how we do condition assessment. So I think about street scan. I think about our tourism-oriented bike trails and the destination that we are trying to become. I think about Conkle Creek and the multi-use trail, another success of this term, and something council from last term as well as this term were focused on, something that we were successful in securing senior levels of government for. So mobility, active transportation, again, Councillor highlighted the slow roll. An idea of his, I think when I talked to Councillor Russell and Pachariva a few months ago, an idea Councillor Pachariva kept throwing out last term, no one seemed to bite, almost like the snow fence that we're working on still, Councillor, the living snow fence. Staff's looking at me probably and cursing me now. But, it's those types of ideas, and I share those stories, I think, only to highlight it is these innovative things that we look at and determine. We don't always deliver on them right away because I think there needs to be things that are built upon to get there. But we have an active transportation committee that's strong. We have two council representatives that I think are very passionate about it. Councillor Russell even told me he took a picture without falling, so kudos to him. But again, I take a pause here, I think, just to highlight the importance of active transportation and people moving around our committee. And you hear everything here from just how we do winter maintenance, and so to Jillian and her team, to the multi-use trail. And I think one of the themes you're going to see across this is just how this team works together. That multi-use trail involves Shannon as much as it involves Dave in Public Works, as much as it involves, if we get an issue or a complaint from a bylaw perspective, Director Bruder. So it really is a combination across multiple teams for us to get where we are. Next slide. Advocacy, is the first one here, and specifically when we talk about diversified housing options. We don't always have as much of an input or an impact on this particular topic because of what it is, because of the oversight on this particular issue. But I think one of the things we did, and kudos to Councillor Regima for her passion in terms of the Housing and Homelessness Community Partnership Committee that was really established by Council, and half the members of Council sit on that committee. I've attended a number of those meetings, and I think the passion that everyone feels about this topic is there. There's work to be done. I think everybody wants to get down and find a project that we can work on that really delivers on some of the objectives and priorities that we have, but this is one of those areas that Council's really put an effort and a focus on. We talk about housing options and varied housing stock, and I think we're trying to address that a little bit in our zoning bylaw. And of course, when we look at, again, a CIP review, I won't presuppose where Council goes on there, but I think you're gonna see us look at incentivize, or get away from incentivizing, I think, conventional and traditional housing, and really move towards some of the priority areas that Council has. Affordable housing, again, looking at our rural areas, looking at some of our commercial opportunities. So this is an area that you're gonna see us, I think, move in the direction of and do a lot more work on. This is one of those long-term things that we started the planning for, and I think as we move forward, more of it will come to fruition. Next slide. Intergovernmental leadership. Again, I think collaboration and partnership is what jumps out here at me. I'm not going to go into each of these. Also, what jumps out is between $22 and $25 million in senior level of government funding that we've been able to receive. So that doesn't come without having a strategy and relationships with senior levels of government. And so that's not happening just at a provincial level. That's happening at a federal and a provincial level. And so our thanks, I think, goes out to those senior levels of government. But our applications are always strengthened when we have partners, like you see at the bottom of the slide there in that last point. Brock, Niagara, DAPS, VRIC, as well as a number of other organizations. So cannot be understated in terms of the work and the efforts that go on from an intergovernmental perspective. And this involves Council. As much as sometimes those AMO meetings are challenging, they're long, we get 15 minutes, and it seems like it's a little bit of a repetitive dog and pony show. It really is an essential part of what we do in terms of building relationships. But it's also what happens when we're not at those meetings. It's the conversations that happen outside those meetings that are also integral. Next slide. So vibrant community, to create a happy, healthy, and prosperous community. Not necessarily as easy as it looks on these slides, but an important area for our community. Next slide. So again, the themed areas here are being an engaged community, cultivating agricultural excellence through support for innovation, driving economic potential and community well-being, and becoming a top tourist destination. So a couple of key activities and initiatives on this particular slide. Shop Lincoln, of course, .ca, something that came out of the pandemic. And I haven't really mentioned the pandemic in all of this. I'll end with a couple comments on the pandemic, but all of this has been able to be achieved while the pandemic was ongoing for the last 2 years. And really, we're at the tail end of that pandemic, but all of this really, I think when we looked at some of the exercises we went through with Laurie Simpson in kind of creating that, those possible scenarios, we talked about catastrophes and we talked about crises that may evolve at that time. I don't think we ever thought this would happen and that we'd find ourselves dealing with a 2-year global pandemic. But another one that I'll just highlight quickly here on this particular slide really is the customer service strategy. Something, again, long-term, something we're focused on, but customer service remains a key focus for what we do. And I try when I hear things or I get examples of that customer service. I know on the weekend I sent something to the chair and the ward councilors from a young man, Brandon, who works at Charles Daly Park in community services. And we heard from Mr. and Mrs. McQueen, who we all know very affectionately, who have no issue sharing when things are going wrong in the community, but also when things are going well. And Marion left us a message, and it was sweet. I listened to it. Dave Warden shared it with me. And really that message was really Marion talking about what this young man, Brandon, does at the park, the pride he takes in the park. And it's those stories, I think, that talk about what customer service actually means. And so Brandon sent me an email that night because I thanked him, and I looped in a lot of the counselors on that thanks. And he was thanking me for having a job that he can come to and he can work at. And so it really, I think, is a testament to the staff we have here and to the customer service mindset that I think we're trying to build. Next slide. So I think this is one, probably in a lot of ways, that I'm incredibly proud of, just what we're doing around agricultural excellence. I think when we talk to certain residents, sometimes we hear, well, where's the focus on ag? And where's the focus on our agricultural community? I think if you talk to our agricultural community, they'll tell you that relationship and that partnership is strong as ever. They have a one-way line to Director Bruder, Director Deanne, anytime they have an issue, anytime they have a challenge, both from a planning perspective or just navigating government and issues. And we heard that around recent development charges issues at the region. We, of course, are looking at how we support our farming community, on-farm diversified uses, et cetera. I'll highlight the work that's going on right now at VRIC, and I think sometimes we forget that VRIC really in a lot of ways is our center of excellence, is that innovation hub, and right now they're creating a tree research park, which in and of itself will be a tool for municipalities and other levels of government across this country to use in terms of what's going on there. So a number of key initiatives in this area, and innovation and agriculture really do go hand in hand. Next slide. Here, again, Paul will talk a little bit about this, I think, when he highlights some of his comments, but I think I'll highlight the Ontario Heritage Trust stewardship arrangement. Again, it goes to collaboration. I told you opportunity and collaboration are a theme in here, and one of the things that I think Council has remained focused on. And so I think, I'll highlight that here, and I'll let staff talk about the other things they're most proud of. Next slide. Top tourist destination. This is probably the easiest one to talk about, and we probably could have had 3 or 4 slides of this. The picture there shows you the Jordan Village Improvement Project. I've highlighted the museum. We're talking about gateways and wayfinding, all the things that are happening. I'll let Director Deanne speak about the Niagara Benchlands, but again, a new tourism brand identity that more and more people are highlighting and speaking to the positives of. Next slide. So lastly, in terms of priority areas, being a resilient community, and probably a great way to end when we think about what we've endured the last couple of years. And so this is really about being intentional and building strong community resilience. Next slide. The areas really that make this up are promoting a health and safe community, championing environmental stewardship and smart growth, adapting and responding to climate change, and responsible and sustainable financial management. So again, a couple of key priorities in this particular area that I think are of note this weekend. I'm getting ahead of myself. Today we talked about the Shared Fire Services Project. So again, a way to make our program sustainable and a way to continue to move forward. Today we've talked about truck safety. We've talked about blitzes. We've talked about bypass routes, all the things that I think we do and we do on a regular basis to look at becoming and continuing to be a health and safe community. Next slide. Championing environmental stewardship. Again, here's where I was going to go before I got excited because I wasn't there. Talking about the butterfly garden and Rotary Park. That really is a piece of green infrastructure that's sustainable. Our corporate climate adaptation plan. A single-use plastics and green waste program pilot. I remember when Councillor McPherson mentioned this, I think a couple of us wondering, how do we make this happen and could we do it? Again, I highlighted the importance of VRIC, the tree planting standards in terms of working both from a staff and developer side of life, and of course, the site alteration bylaw. Next slide. Again, I won't go into all of these. You know, a couple here that stand out really are some of our design standards and some of the work that's going on now in terms of emergency response in Lakeshore Road. Next slide. Budget process. I suspect Director Wagner is going to talk to you about a couple of things he's proud of. He'll probably highlight the budget process improvements and some of the things we've been able to do there. You're going to hear a little bit about a corporate asset management plan. We have an approved reserves and reserve funds policy. I see Councillor Russell smiling, Chair Russell. These are things that really get him excited, and so these are good things. Rate and fee study, community benefit plans. Again, I think all the things that we look at that, you know, when we talk about financial and fiscal management are important. Next slide. So really, I think, you know, in conclusion, and again, I'm going to turn to each member of SMT to give you 1 or 2 points they're most proud of. Under Council's leadership and direction, we have been able to create a community that's welcoming, connected, vibrant, and resilient. This has been the focus of the past 4 years, and while the pandemic has forced us to pivot, prioritize, I think we did a little bit of that work, and having the council priorities as a guideline really helped us weather that storm. So we look forward to building upon this success with the next term of council, and I will start and go in order. And I hear the team over there giggling. Maybe they're saying I highlighted all the things they're most proud of, but they can highlight them again. So I'm going to go to Shannon first.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. I think we're giggling when you said 1 or 2 points, and we're all looking at what we scrolled down or what we've got jotted down on our points. But perhaps I'll set the tone, and then you guys can either go more or less. But I mean, there's so much to be proud of over the past few years. There's obviously the major capital projects that, you know, the grand opening of Rotary Park this weekend, the completion of Procridge Park, the museum, but it goes much deeper than just what you see and the deliverables that the community sees. It's how we got to that point. And so I am most proud of the staff, and the CAO touched on it a bit, about our IDEA lens: inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And we look at everything we do, small projects, large projects, with those lens. We were so excited to be able to do pilot projects, and we're doing that so that we can prove first what we believe. We did the pilot project for the off-leash dog park, which I recently received a call on, and was asked by Chris Pickles a number of questions, how we did that, why we did that. It's the right way to do projects. We did the pilot project with the lighting in Hillary Bald. We did the SEPTED audit. We've done changing and piloting programming like Hillary Bald Outdoor Rink, where we shared the ice between skating and hockey. The stats for the museum, you've seen them by the numbers. I mean, just a huge accomplishment for the staff to raise over $400,000 in grants. And that was last year. This year, they've already secured all the grant funding for summer positions that they're hiring. So every single summer position will be offset by grants they've applied for. The team is amazing. The team is producing. The report that you saw tonight on the deaccessioning of the cider press speaks to that. It was comprehensive. It answered all of council's questions. The LID, the green infrastructure that the CAO talked about, the butterfly garden, Fleming Garden, the rain gardens that we're planning for the Jordan Hollow Indigenous Park, the soil amendments that we're working on for Ashby Park, along with our partners in Vineland Research and Brock University. We have a great partnership with Brock University for a research assistant this summer, and we're working closely with planning on that. And we've got a project we've deemed All Things Trees, and we will be coming back to council with you with a presentation and a report in the fall on that. So lots of things. I think probably the biggest thing that I am most proud of my team in community services is our ability to pivot during the pandemic. We continue to do these projects, we continue to deliver, while at the same time, we put up shields, we put out stickers, we put out posters. We were able to pivot with that as well. And I think a lot of what we started during the pandemic will continue. Take-home kits, drive-through events. Those aren't necessarily going to stop. If they make sense, we'll continue to do them. So the outreach to seniors, the vulnerable communities. I probably have many more points on here, but.
More than 2 or
just
3 for
really
sure.
proud, sorry. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague.
Thank you. That's pretty good sized gauntlet you just laid down there. But, I think for us, for the Building and Planning Department, I don't have to tell any of you, we've been seeing a progressively increasing workload. There's a lot happening in Lincoln from a development standpoint. During this term, we've hit record highs with the amounts of building permits, with the amounts of planning applications. Last year, we well exceeded 200 planning applications with our staff complement. That's a massive achievement. So, in intaking all of these, we're always looking for ways to be better, to process things, to streamline things, and to collaborate with applicants, with prospective developers. We're looking at updating our software from a building permit application standpoint to streamline that, make it better for online submissions. So again, we can improve the customer service experience. From a planning standpoint, we always try to work with the developers to come up with the best solution for the town. Many different types of built forms and housing options have gone through the at least initial planning stages during this term, adding to our overall housing stock and providing more diversity. Even from a commercial standpoint, we've been able to achieve a lot, and we're constantly pushing to try to get as much space as we can to really add to that vibrancy, add to that, overall range of what makes Lincoln a complete community. But, in considering all of this development that's been ongoing, we're also trying to make sure that we recognize the character that's here. I think a big milestone in that regard was when we went forward with establishing the interim control bylaw for the King Street corridor in Beamsville, so we could really take a look at it from a heritage conservation standpoint. It's an important process and one that'll lead to not only recommendations for that corridor, but we'll look at other areas too to determine what's appropriate. When we move through these development applications, we've mentioned VRIC. We've now got a couple recent planning applications that are going to be going into the site plan stage, and we're actually going to be involving them in that process. They're going to be involved. They're working directly with staff, with the developers. So we've really taken that extra step, looking at it through the lens of climate change resiliency, but also just landscaping considerations to just make sure we further develop those practices. We demonstrated how quick and nimble we are to address concerns that we're seeing in the public when we developed our regulatory framework for cannabis. I can tell you that wasn't easy by any means. Took a lot of hard work by a number of different people, but we now have, out of the three-pronged approach that we were looking at, 2 of those are complete. We've got a public nuisance bylaw, and we have land use permissions in place to address a lot of those compatibility issues that we were hearing about, which I can say, you don't completely get rid of them, but we've definitely mitigated them, and we're going to continue to do so. And then finally, from a bylaw perspective, again, we mentioned the pandemic. A lot was put on the bylaw team's shoulders, not just around, enforcement, making sure emergency orders were being adhered to, but even just the education piece for visitors, or not visitors, for residents and businesses. A lot of questions, they had to field in addition to their regular duties. They did that well. But during this term, we've also updated a whole range of bylaws, from the noise bylaw to the site alteration and fill bylaw. We've put some new ones in place. I mentioned the public nuisance bylaw, private property parking bylaw. So really, just make sure that we continue to protect and enhance the community that we have here, and making sure that the well-being of the residents is maintained. So those are the comments I was hoping to make. Thank you.
Director Graham? Keep it to 3. No,
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. CAO. Yeah, I think first off, I'd like to, I'm very proud of my staff, my Public Works team. A lot of the Public Works projects and programs that you have here before you tonight are a result of all their hard work. And they continue to do great work and provide a great service for our residents. Some highlights I'd like to make. I'd like to make some comments around transit. We've really done a great job, as council and as staff working together and collaborating with the Niagara region with the on-demand model that's currently underway. I think it's a great program. It was really, it really fit Lincoln in terms of offering mobility freedom for our residents. Whether you live in an urban area or a rural area, transit is available to you. So I think that is really something to be proud of. And it's doing extremely well. We get the metrics from the region. We're continuing to see our ridership grow. And again, it's been a real success story. So wanted to highlight that. I know our CAO touched on it, but truck safety, we've done a lot of collaboration and made a lot of progress with MTO and the regional police. We now have regular truck safety blitzes across the community, and they're leading those agencies, so that's something to be proud of to where we were before. So a lot of good news in that element. Also traffic safety in general, we've really developed a great program for traffic safety, and you know, we're also, it's what we do now. It's a lens we apply to the work we do. Our capital projects all include traffic calming and traffic safety elements, so I think, you know, we've made a lot of good progress there. I know our CEO highlighted Conco Creek, but that's just an amazing project. You know, we were able to, you know, build a real sustainable project. I know something that's what council wants us to be looking at from an environmental perspective, stormwater management perspective, incorporating climate change into that project, and then, you know, the active transportation success of that project and connecting different neighborhoods, communities, and, you know, it's been a real success. So really, really proud of that project. I know our CEO highlighted as well the Jordan Village Improvement Project, and again, that's a real accomplishment, seeing that get to construction. Construction's underway. I know that project's been talked about a long time, so it's really nice to see that happening and being implemented for the community. And the public safety that project will bring with the intersection realignments, sidewalks, traffic calming, and then again, all the other elements as well in terms of, you know, being that destination that, you know, council wanted around tourism and economic development. And maybe one last one again, just I'd like to highlight is completing our climate adaptation corporate plan. I think that's a real accomplishment and really shows council's commitment to being a resilient community. So, thank you.
Thank you. So before I go to Julie, I'm going to go to Jacqueline Buchanan, who's on the screen.
I thought you would go around the horseshoe. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. I want to echo what people have said before. For me, I am really, really proud of the resilience that all of our employees have shown. Through all of the changes that have happened over the last 4 years, the absolute pace of work and change, but also with the pandemic, and Shannon kind of touched on it, and the ability to pivot, the ability to just run with it, roll with it, whatever we needed to do with it, but still make sure that our residents have the best experience possible. So very, very proud of that. And I think that is really due to the support that we've been able to provide everybody through your leadership, as well as the policies and procedures we've been able to put in and renew and upgrade. So I think that that was a real shining moment for me. Mentioned also the increasing diversity, the equity. We're definitely leading the region in that, especially at the senior table, which is always nice to see. And the inclusive vision. Mike touched on the partnerships that we've been fostering and growing, and the amazing work that's coming out of those partnerships. And finally, I'm trying to keep to 3, Mike. See, so I've got my 3 points. The customer service strategy. I have been absolutely blown away with the passion that our employees have brought to this project, and just the amazing discussions that we've been having, and we continue to have. And so that project is coming to its fruition shortly. So you are going to be presented with, and I quote the committee, the best customer service strategy in the region and the province. So those are the three things that I couldn't have done it without everybody and the collaboration that we all are showing and the real partnerships that we have. So thank you.
I didn't even know that, members of council. Which, you know, is becoming a trend. But all joking aside, Director Wagner.
Well, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate that. I'm happy to be here to talk to council and SMT about the great things that the finance and IT teams have done over the term of council, or what they've helped to support along the way. The first item is a recent item that we presented to the council just the weeks past. And I'd like to highlight as a recent achievement that the finance team under the guidance of Terry Chihuahua successfully implemented Zendesk. It is a tool we now use in the finance department. The system allows us to effectively manage, track, and support our residents' requests for service. Further, the tool allows us to track our overall service delivery. And with the data we gather, it will help us find ways we can continually improve our customer service to our residents. We strongly believe in providing the best service we can to our residents. The second item, I know Mike touched on that I would highlight the budget and the budget process. That's an iterative process that will continually improve over time as we take feedback and we adapt and we adjust. The second item I'd really like to talk to is something that's near and dear to me. It's fiscal sustainability. I'm extremely proud of the development of the reserves and reserves fund policy we recently did, and the work done to date on the asset management plan, which will be presented next to the council next. The reserves policy ensures that the town has the appropriate framework, governance processes, and helps ensure fiscal sustainability, not only for today, but well into the future. The asset management plan touches all departments, and it is a culmination of a 4-year cross-functional initiative that looks at all the town's infrastructure, including costs, any risks, our priorities, and opportunities to ensure we are considering the long-term implications associated with providing sustainable levels of services to our residents. This is merely the first iteration of the plan, and we're confident that it will be a key tool to support evidence-based decision-making into the future. And the third and final item is tied to safeguarding our assets, primarily information. And I would like to highlight our cybersecurity asset enhancements through the IT team that help support the implementation of many tools as well. Over the past year, we have acquired additional tools to help safeguard the town from potential cyber-related attacks and to safeguard our operations. We continue to look at ways to safeguard our assets and are undertaking additional steps this year to strengthen and harden our IT infrastructure from external attacks. We realize this is something we must continue to do and stay on top of. So I'm really pleased and really proud of the finance team and IT staff for what they've done and what we plan to do in the future. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Lawrence. Director Kirkos. Kathleen, you're up next.
Thanks, Mr. CAO. As you've touched on various council priorities and updates, I wanted to highlight that over the last 4 years, there have been significant enhancements to the Clerks and Legislative Services Department and portfolio. Our department is in the unique position of working with all departments, council, the public, as well as agencies and levels of government. I'll touch on the few of the most significant achievements, and as the Director of Legislative Services and Town Clerk, and on behalf of my team, I'm happy to speak to our collective accomplishments. We've achieved success in engaging our citizens through the establishment of numerous citizen advisory committees. Becoming a member of a citizen committee or board offers residents a unique chance to volunteer their highly valued skills and to strengthen our community. We've officially established the Active Transportation Advisory Committee, Age Friendly, Museum Advisory Committee, Housing and Homelessness Community Partnership, and Joint Fire Services. Throughout the pandemic, the Clerks and Legislative Services Department have been nimble and flexible in how we respond to the demands and the needs of the municipality, especially how quick we are to move to a virtual platform while still providing the opportunity for community to engage with council. I'm happy to report it was successful, with the support of council. We also moved our advisory committees to a virtual platform when other municipalities were halting those altogether. I'd like to take this time to thank our valuable volunteers for their dedication to continue, because without them, the important work that has been accomplished would not have been possible. In regards to improving social and economic inclusion, we've been successful in this regard through the creation of a hybrid meeting model of council and council chambers with all of our technological upgrades. Not only meeting new legislative requirements, this provides more ways for citizens and council to facilitate citizen connection, inclusivity, and a greater accessibility to engage all citizens. The hard work that went into this upgrade would not have been possible without the clerk's team, as well as the IT services team working together and have it successfully delivered, which you see in action tonight, both in person and with remote attendance. Citizen engagement also includes our biggest project to date, such as the municipal election, which we deliver every 4 years. Last year, we utilized the Speak Up Lincoln platform to help obtain valuable feedback from our community on how they would like to vote in the upcoming 2022 municipal election. I'm happy to report that we will be providing an online and in-person voting that is utilizing technology to make our democratic right to vote more accessible. Throughout the 2020 and 2021, our department held countless civil ceremonies and safely offered commissioning and other services to the community and surrounding citizens in Ontario. We were one of the few, but did so safely and efficiently. Legislative services and clerks will continue to promote civic local government through the annual promotions and other areas where we can excel in open and transparent governance. The legislative services and clerks team is dedicated to being responsible with respect to public service, innovation, and inclusive to ensure an effective and trusted local government. And we're excited to embark on the upcoming projects for 2023. And a special thank you to the remarkable team that I have for all their hard work. And thank you to council for your continued support.
Kathleen, I think I'm going to go down now and say two comments to everyone. Kathleen, and then wrapping up with Paul. It's the end, and I do appreciate council's patience. And jokingly, we had this conversation at SMT about council and presentations and how you like us to be a little tighter and a little more succinct. This, I would say, council may not agree with me totally. Probably one of the most important presentations we give you in a term, your priority document, and really this is a culmination of it. So all kidding aside, Kathleen, go ahead.
Thanks, Mike. Okay. So to build on the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee that was established by council, that committee also has a terms of reference. Now, within the region, it's recognized that the region is a service provider for housing. But there are a number of things that local municipalities can do to facilitate affordable housing, because Lincoln, for example, is responsible for things like CIPs and zoning. On behalf of council, this new housing committee has reviewed and provided comments on a number of memos from staff. They range from the region's affordable housing incentives of other municipalities, the draft CIP affordable housing incentives, some of the changes to the town's zoning bylaw being facilitated through planning, as well as the provincial housing task force recommendations. The CIP review is underway, and the purpose of that is to obviously encourage the construction of housing that's affordable to what we call low and moderate income households, as well as the construction market and affordable rental housing in alignment with council's priorities. As well, this CIP review is also to look at ways that we can get the construction more commercial floor space, particularly in some of our mixed use developments. It's much easier for a developer to build the residential component versus the commercial, but we also need more tourism accommodation. And as well, we also need to look at other ways that we can encourage through financial incentives, environmental sustainability in some of these projects. The interim update to the development charges bylaw has now been approved by council. It's in its appeal period. As mentioned earlier tonight, there has to be a new development charge bylaw in place for next fall. As well, the other thing, the community benefits study is underway. At this point, there's some background work being done. And the purpose of that is to address changes to the Planning Act as it relates to community benefits. And that's all.
Thank you, Kathleen. And last but not least, Mr. Deanny.
Thank you, Mike, and I appreciate going last. As seen as my colleagues were so verbose, I was quickly typing over here, and we'll add to the comments here. But I do appreciate Director Booter's 10 pages of notes, so I'll have to match that. But members of council, thank you, for being here this evening. And the one thing I wanted to talk about, there's a few things, but the one thing I wanted to lead off with is our economic development strategy. So back in 2019, council did put forward a strategic plan to help grow our economy, create jobs, and attract new business and retain our business here in our community. And that really did set the stage for the work plan for this term of council. And as I said, this forward-looking strategic document was really detailed about how we can create jobs. And one of the key things I wanted to highlight from that economic development strategy was the creation of our tourism strategy. Recognizing that tourism and value-added agriculture does contribute a lot to our local economy and creating thousands of jobs here in our Lincoln, it did require its own strategy to help grow that sector of the economy. And coming out of that, it did really talk about how we can have a more forward approach when it comes to tourism, but also how we can develop a new tourism brand identity for the community. And as the CEO said, we went in consultation with a lot of our partners, the Niagara benchlands, to really play off our strengths. The escarpment here in our community does run from east to west, and it unites Lincoln into a new tourism branding that really will focus on what, as we call Niagara's other natural wonder, the escarpment. And of course, one of our main categories in our economic development strategy and the tourism strategy, which was reflected in council's priorities for this term, is really creating a community that includes economic inclusion for Lincoln. So some of our solutions around that included our Agritech Hackathon, which was, the CEO selected or mentioned, was Ontario's first ever Agritech Hackathon, designed to support Lincoln's agriculture and our tech sectors, but also get youth interested in agriculture and technology for the community. In addition, as the CEO indicated, the Youth Skills Studio, as you can imagine, we're very proud to announce to the community, which we've done before, but we'll do it again, the $5 million that we've received to support this initiative over the past couple of years. And this is really around training and attracting youth into our community, but also supporting our local businesses at the same time. And of course, we've done that in partnership with Civic Connect, a local not-for-profit organization. Digital Main Street. So over the past 4 years, we've been successful in bringing $57,000 from the province to implement a digital service squad here in our community. And again, that's helping support businesses pivot to online digital technology, which, as you can imagine, was very supportive throughout the pandemic. And we just learned late last week that we're getting an additional $93,000 from the province to support and hire a Digital Main Street student from July 2022, so this year, until March 2024. So a 2-year period to support additional pandemic recovery in our community. And as many of my colleagues here, we talked about the pandemic and how we've had to pivot throughout the past couple of years, and we've done that in a few initiatives. Shoplincoln.ca, of course, was to support our businesses, encouraging online shopping and local shopping to make sure that our businesses survive throughout the pandemic. We've been quite successful throughout the pandemic. The businesses have really rallied, and a lot of our communities have rallied around our businesses, and to the point where we've emerged stronger, more resilient, and a much more adaptive business community here in our community. And of course, you've heard me talk before about the $500,000 we've received from the feds to support tourism adaptation and recovery in our community. And a lot of that went toward tourism and hospitality-based businesses. And one of the main things that they used that on was the temporary patio expansions. In consultation with our folks and our colleagues in planning, we help support businesses expand patios, and a lot of those things we turned around in a 24-hour period. And of course, last but not least is communication. So of course, working with my colleague Lillian and the communications team, we've been laser focused on increasing communications through our residents, engagement, and making sure our residents are informed. And we've done that through a number of activities, but most importantly, Speak Up Lincoln, which has been talked about by a few colleagues today, but also our council newsletters delivered right to the doors of our community to make sure they're informed and engaged in a lot of the projects that we're working on. So thank you, Mike, and back to you.
So thank you to my team that every day continues to deliver. And I've got 2 closing comments. One about the team. I've been fortunate over the last 25 years of doing this. I sat around a few leadership teams with a lot of different people. A lot of them have gone on, worked at other municipalities. This team is one of the best I've been fortunate to sit around. I'd put them against any other team in the province. They've continued to deliver. They're a great team. We challenge each other. We don't always agree on things, and that's okay. That's the way it should be. But we get things done. And it's also not just the team that you see here in terms of the leadership team, but it's the people sitting in the crowd here and the many others, I think, behind the scenes that get stuff done. Our IT team, and Matt's leaving us, and that's a travesty for us, but great for him as he moves on, but someone who, again, has been phenomenal in terms of what he's done. The clerks team, finance, I think of Liliana and her work, Jillian as well. So kudos to that. And of course, council, you ask tough questions, you ask good questions, you challenge us, and those are important things when we look at public service, when we look at democracy. And as we end this term, we're not there yet, and this isn't one of those kind of end-of-term speeches, but I think we've collectively enjoyed working with you. And now we're open to any questions council may have or comments.
Thank you, Mr. CAO, and thank you all to staff for your commentary. Before I turn it over to council for questions and comments, I'd like to make just a quick few notes that I've been happy to just think about as we saw that list. And again, the strange dichotomy over the last 4 years that it's been like basically the longest 4 years I've ever experienced, but it's also gone by in a snap. And being a first-time counselor, again, I also have no frame of reference to compare this to, but as we were going through that list, and as I was listening to the comments from each of the department heads, like, you get this overwhelming sense of pride, just in a number of senses. One of being part of the team that maybe moved some of these big objectives forward, but also as a community member to see the town that you live in and you're raising your family in, to do such great things and to constantly exceed expectations. And again, I hope everybody, even on those days where it's tough to get out of bed and it's tough to pick up the phone because you know it's going to be a tough call, understand the difference that you all make. And again, it's one of those things that I've getting to know the team a lot better, and there's a lot of team people out there I haven't had the privilege to meet yet. Again, it's been one of the most rewarding 4 years I've had, just getting to know and watching some of the people on that table and yourself develop and grow in their roles, and then keep on adding these great projects. And each project seems to just be better than the next. And I have a hard time really fathoming what's going to happen in the next 4 years based on how great the last 4 have been and the number of things that have come to fruition. So again, for that, I thank you. I think it's a bit of a misnomer to call these council priorities. Again, I think this really is, again, the way staff do their job and the dedication at which all of you do professionally and with such passion. So again, I thank you all for that. So with that being said, I will now open up the council. And Councillor Pachariva, you are first.
Thank you, Chair Russell. Oh, I shut myself off. We're good? Thank you, Chair Russell. And you know what? And I was sitting here and I was remiss because I got so excited with our AT event. I would be a pretty crappy chair if I didn't say thank you, Director McKay, for an awesome event to launch Rotary Park on Saturday. Was there only for a couple hours, but to see the smiling faces and the beehive of activity. It was incredible, from Pilates to yoga to the snow cone truck, ice cream truck, and the other food truck, and just it was the toing and froing. So thank you to that and the event that you delivered at Prokich Park in the midst of a pandemic to get the family down, and it wasn't as big as what we had planned or as grandiose, but it got the job done. So kudos to you and your team. It was incredible. You know what? The finance department has a little sign up that says they get things done. Stuff. I use that word, stuff. But I think maybe we should change, the town of Lincoln, a place to grow, a place to prosper, a place to belong. We get stuff done. Because you can just see this list and everything that staff has put out. And you know what, as counselors, you know what, we probably send too many emails with pictures and stuff like that, but you guys react to us immediately. And you get us the answers, and we relay that to residents, and you're the ones that make us look good. So I appreciate each and every one of you. And thank you, Mr. Deanne, too, for mentioning, because I didn't see it in there. And one of the things that we had really stressed was communication. We all know the great things that we do, but how do we get that message out? How do we tell the people what's doing? That's the council newsletter. That's the mayor's newsletter. And before we were told it couldn't happen the way that we wanted it to happen, you made it happen. So, people know what we're doing. People know what a great place it is to be. And like Councillor Russell said, one can only fathom, what's next in store. We've got, the Ashby Park improvements. We've got the park at Cherry Heights. Like, these things just keep coming. So we're going to be able to add to that list over the next few months to have a more fulsome report and thing. And Mr. Kirkopoulos, you know what? When staff is this engaged and has this much to do, they're peacocks, let them fly.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to follow that, but I don't. You're right, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Patriva. Councillor Mikulik, you're up next.
Thank you very much, Chair Russell. Through you to our CAO and staff. I also want to say thank you. Saturday morning, that grand opening, I felt good. I took a shower. The water was clean. There's no issues. It smelled great. I was able to hop in my truck. I was able to drive over. Didn't hit a pothole or anything like that. I signed up for this bicycle tour. And me and my wife both did it. And, we got to see a lot of the trails and the connectivity and the paths. And we had a wonderful time and met some local people that participated in it as well. And they loved it too. And so far as that my wife said, I should get more of my students to participate in these sort of events, as a regular resident, you just go to work, go to soccer practice, do the things you enjoy, and think it all just happens. But it doesn't just all happen. It takes this motivation and passion that our staff display. And I know this because I don't think I've read a fictional book for 3.5 years because I'm too busy reading these 700-page reports to prepare myself for these meetings where I ask 1,000 questions and staff always answers, takes the time to answer them, and council's patient and listening to hearing them. So I too also want to thank everyone. Question I have though, and in saying all these wonderful things that's been happening, are we able to the CAO going to be able to sustain this in the future? Am I going to continue to be able to, given the fact that we've gone through a pandemic, there's some possible challenging times ahead of us financially, are we going to be able to sustain this? And what's your thoughts on keeping this going?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor, first and foremost, I appreciate your comments and your questions and, whatever they may be throughout the last 3.5, almost 4 years now. So don't change. To your question around sustainability, I think that is one of the things that really is at the forefront of what we're doing. I talked a little bit about some of the themes that I think you'd hear, whether it be innovation, whether it be efficiency. And I probably should have mentioned sustainability, and I don't just say that in the environmental sense, I say that in the fiscal sense. I think those are the conversations we're having now. We talked earlier about prioritizing roads projects. Are we going to be able to deliver on all that council wants as we set forth on a new priority and a new schedule of priorities for council? Yes, but I think we need to continue to look at what we're capable of doing within the resources we have, what we're capable of doing within the financial and I think fiscal environment that we're going to find ourselves in. I think Director Wagner always talks about crystal balling, and he wishes we had a crystal ball. I probably wish that too, so we could figure out where we're going. I think we do our best to anticipate possible scenarios that we look at in the future, and we need to have multiple possible scenarios. And I think that is one of the exercises that Laurie Simpson took council and staff through when we were developing the strategic plan. If this scenario happens, then how do we deal with it? If this scenario happens, how do we then deal with that? So we will be able, I'm telling you, and want to give you confidence that we're going to be prepared for whatever the future holds. Does that mean we're going to have a list of 100 projects like we do this year? Maybe, maybe not. Some of those projects may look different. I think as we evolve as a community and change as a community, the list of priorities and projects will be different. I look at BDSS, a large, multi-year, multi-pronged project that has multiple parts to it. So when I present you maybe things we're doing around an engaged community, it may look different. It may be one big project with multiple parts versus 10 little projects. I don't know that, but I can tell you that we will be prepared, we will be ready, and that you will remain engaged in providing direction to staff as we look at our new set of priorities in the future. Council will have to set those priorities based on what you hear. That really is the process we go through every 4 years. We have an overarching strategic plan in terms of direction that is of a 10-year horizon, and then we have council priorities in terms of what we deliver. So collectively, I remain incredibly positive that we're going to be prepared for those. It just may mean instead of doing 10, maybe we're doing 8, or maybe we're doing 7, but we'll do 7 really, really well.
I appreciate that. I just, I just want to continue the affordability for our current residents as well as future residents. I want to be able to pay Director Wagner's staff my tax bill, and I don't want to have to necessarily seek a job from Jacqueline Buchanan, in order to pay those taxes. So these are the things that are of concern, is that continued affordability, especially with the times that we're hearing about moving forward. So thank yourself as well for your leadership, in assembling your staff and ensuring that they're all motivated. And I think council does a good job motivating them with our questions and asks. So thank you very much. That's all, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mikulik. And I know Madam Mayor has a few comments, but before I go to that, I just want to also just point out, because we've talked about the event on Saturday, and I would be remiss if I did not say a big thank you to Sarah Ain, because she was a lot of the motivating factor of the things behind the scenes and getting things organized. And I know we've talked about Shannon's terrific department, and she was a big part of that big event as well. So I just want to thank her. And I see her name on there, no face, but I know she's listening, or she'll get the details later. So, Madam Mayor, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I know that a lot of those games that were being played on the open lawn on Saturday were the work of Laurie Laird. I've never ever seen Councillor Russell engage in tug of war with 5 children, but I want to tell you, he lost. I don't know what was happening there. But Laurie had all these games going, and it was great. I didn't think there was enough room there for individual games, but she certainly proved us wrong. And giant Jenga, that was a big one. So I want to speak about what's happening here tonight. I want to speak to the community about the fact that this is not, absolutely is not, 45 minutes to pat people on the back. What's happening here is an accountability session, and it's the first time that we've done it on this scale, and I'm very pleased that it has rolled out as it has. So thank you very much, Mr. CAO, for preparing your staff to be as candid and as complete as they have been tonight. I think the word sustainability is the watchword for the future. I've been thinking about this for the last, I think I started thinking about it in the last year of the first term, knowing what was coming on the horizon and the importance of getting our financial house in order. It's great to have money flowing in, revenue flowing in, but you can't always guarantee that that money is going to be there, and you're always in competition with every other municipality in the province for money. And our partnerships and our consistency and the quality of the work that's being done certainly doesn't go unnoticed when these applications are sent in for review. The responsibility of council is to be the leaders within the community. We represent your interests. We come to the table. We can come up with a number of projects. But if those projects are not attached to an asset management plan or a transportation master plan or a sport, recreation, and culture master plan, they really don't have the same weight. And so it's not just a matter of people talking and coming up with a list. We have a responsibility as executive members to ensure that that plan is as complete and comprehensive, that the prioritization takes place many times throughout the process. I think you heard that discussion tonight in terms of Bartlett Road and Durham Road and the goals and objectives that we're trying to achieve. We have to have that flexibility. So that is our role. And we hire a CAO to be responsible for the staff, to hire a very, very good team. And so this is a report card. It's good when you can pat people on the back and say, thank you for a job well done. And we are doing that. And I hope that you will also feel the level of comfort that we have in doing that. However, this isn't the end of it. And what will happen now is that council will continue on with the CAO to carry out his annual review. And we use this document as the evidence of how well the CAO has been leading his team. And so it does become, you know, a little humorous, of course. Everybody's feeling pretty good right now. It has been a tremendously successful 4 years. For me and for those of us who have been here for 2 terms, it's been a tremendously successful 8 years. But it doesn't come easily, and you don't have ideas and ideals. You don't have great ideas with no staff to carry them out. And so I think what you should be thinking about tonight is that there is a good team here. The team will change. Unfortunately, I'm really sorry that Matt is leaving, but I'm sure he's already had a big influence on the people that he worked with. So think about that, and know that this is not the end of the discussion, but the beginning, and it truly is the beginning of the discussion for the future council. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and Director Deanne was gesturing to me. He wants to say something. Then we're done, I promise.
Yes, thank you, Mike, and to you, Chair. Just, I know members of council are probably wondering how we're going to communicate this wonderful information that was presented this evening to our members throughout the community. So tomorrow we will be issuing a media release to make sure the media is aware, but also we're going to be doing a community newsletter that will be delivered to each household throughout the community, turning this wonderful document that you see Appendix B into a newsletter, multiple page spread that will be sent out before the end of the month. So thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we get into the exciting world of asset management, or if we start Googling whether or not peacocks actually do fly, I just want to do one last pat on the back to both yourself, Mr. CAO, and our mayor for both mutually steering the ship together and, again, keeping all parties involved, aligned, keeping the conversation going and keep on moving us down the track so that all these objectives are getting fulfilled. So I want to thank you both for that, and we will now proceed. So there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Bernay that report AD-12-22 regarding the 2019 to 2022 delivering on council's priorities for a future fit Lincoln be received for information. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. And I'm closing the vote. And that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. We will now consider item 8.22, Report FN 0622, the 2022 Asset Management Update. The Associate Director of Finance will provide an overview of the presentation. In addition, Raphael Cardin from WSP is in attendance to assist with any questions that council may have after a presentation. Staff have a maximum of 10 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair Russell. Okay, and so tonight we're going to be talking about our asset management update. You can actually go on to the next slide there. So we'll be going over some of the highlights from our asset management plans, as well as providing some context about the Town of Lincoln's asset management program. At the end of the presentation, we'll respond to your questions, as well as take feedback to be incorporated into future iterations of the asset management plans, which we also call AMPs. So next, there are really two objectives tonight. First and foremost, provincial legislation requires municipalities to have a council-approved asset management plan for the core infrastructure in place by July 1st, 2022. This is a requirement in order to apply for and continue to receive grant funding from both the provincial and federal governments. So approving the AMPs this evening will ensure that we're compliant and eligible for grant funding. But more importantly, the presentation will provide context and information to Council on our asset management plans. There's a lot of information and data in the plans that are meant to help inform decision making. So please note, and I really want to highlight this, there's no financial or operational impacts from approving the AMPs here tonight. The financial decisions and project approvals will come through our annual budget process as normal. Next slide. So the scope of involvement for asset-related activities across the organization highlights the need for SMT and Council to focus on the importance and benefits of the asset management program. So an asset management committee was convened with representatives from across the organization in order to shape an asset management culture within the Town of Lincoln. The committee ensures the asset management program meets requirements and that a holistic approach is being used to review and plan assets. As chair and vice chair, Jillian and I facilitate the asset management process by coordinating the asset management committee and liaising with external advisors such as Raphael, who's here from WSP. And in addition, Sean Jackson has played a key role in our data management efforts. Dave Graham is our SMT champion. He provides us guidance and support to the Asset Management Committee, ensuring communication planning and assessment of outcomes are being undertaken. He holds the AMC accountable. Next slide. So Lincoln's asset management plan will be segregated into service area asset management plans that will be maintained by the relevant operating departments. And then the corporate asset management plan, or CAMP, is an overview of the service areas and will include financial information that relate to the town as a whole. The asset management plans in front of you this evening are merely one piece of the town's asset management program, but a lot of time, effort, and work goes into ensuring Lincoln's infrastructure assets are maintained to provide the services that Lincoln residents want. Next slide. So Council's role is to set strategic direction, including the levels of service and resource allocations. So essentially what services will be provided and how much we're willing to spend. In order to set this direction, Council relies on subject matter experts to provide information on the asset performance, condition, risks, and costs. So let's jump right in. Jillian's going to take us through the technical aspects of the Public Works Core Infrastructure Asset Management Plans. Go ahead, Jillian.
Thank you very much, Terry, and thank you, Council, for allowing us to speak about our asset management plan. So to highlight, the first two that I'm going to be going over will be a quick review, 1,000-foot perspective on the core asset management plans. And these ones are the critical ones that we have to bring forward these reports by July 1st to support future funding opportunities. And this is our first step with future marks to hit in 2025 and forward for them. So if you could go to the next slide. One more slide, please. So what I'm going to go over very quickly is what we own, what it's worth, what condition it's in, some of our risk analysis, renewal and projected forecasts, operating forecasts, future considerations, and of course our continuous improvements. Next slide. So within our core asset management plans, this includes everything within the right-of-way, which includes our utilities as well. So roads, bridges, culverts, stormwater management, our water mains, sewers, and associated. We also did include non-core assets within the right-of-way asset management plan that included the active transportation network, the traffic control and roadside safety, and the streetlights. And I do want to note that, again, these aren't core, so we are ahead of schedule for these sections as per the Ontario regulations. So the next slide gives a snapshot of our total asset cost for our right-of-way. So it is we do have a significant amount of assets. Do want to note again that it includes the road base and the road surface. Within these, this was something that was identified in the 2016, and we kept that approach moving forward. So just the surface would be the asphalt or that treated surface, and then the base is that more robust foundation of the road. So next slide, please. This covers the utility, so again, highlighting just a significant amount. Between the two right-of-way and the utilities aspect, that's almost $500 million in assets that we have within these networks. If you could go to the next slide, please. This gives the condition of the assets and how we have it. It's great to see from a visualization aspect. So the majority of our assets are in good and very good condition. This speaks to council priorities with replacing some of our aging infrastructure. I know Councillor or Chair Patriva, the infrastructure, always talks about how great of a job has been done with getting the cast iron water or the old metallic water main out of the system. That definitely speaks to our overall condition profiles through here. And from the right-of-way side, it's that understanding of keep the good roads good and continuing to move forward that way. So this speaks to what our overall conditions are and our age profile, but we are in good shape overall. Next slide, please. To provide a bit of a high-level risk analysis, again, although we do have some higher risk items, these are in areas that we know, so our roads along the lakeshore, when we get some flooding, some ice storms near them, we definitely have mitigation means that we can to bring things down to a more manageable risk. And being aware of these and having that advanced planning, we're able to address them and make sure that our residents are still able to have their level of service required. Going on to the next slide. Again, in utilities, the same thing. The majority of risks are low to medium, pre-mitigation, post-mitigation. They are all within this area. And again, we have mitigation strategies to apply to all areas to make sure that continues level of service. Next slide, please. The 10-year forecast projections shows, as we've talked about a number of times, again, a significant financial contribution throughout, covering improvements, proposed renewals, and then operation and maintenance programs. Again, it is a projection and is fluid for this 10-year expenditures, but wanted to bring this forward. Next slide. This gives our rolling 100-year renewal forecast. So there's a lot of color on that page, so I do apologize for that. And it's a difficult chart to read, but it just shows, as with any municipality and how we have our assets and we've done different lives and different maintenance, we do have a bit of a rolling average as we go through, and it's making sure that we balance that properly and that we're considering appropriate priorities, risk factors, asset age, and to support growth as well. Next slide. So this provides our 10-year expenditure for utilities. Again, it's not as flat of a projection, but we do know that we have a number of investments that need to be made over the first part of the next 10 years to be able to support a number of initiatives to support growth, and then also for some of our aging, or the last of our aging infrastructure. Next slide, please. Again, just providing an overview of our 100-year renewal forecast. What you will see is that kind of mid to late, when you're looking around that 2064, there's a significant spike in overall cost. So that would be something that, as we roll through the 10-year capital plans, being mindful of that projection, and with our rate studies, taking that into consideration as we get closer to that range. And that will be an important item for staff to consider. Next slide, please. So looking forward, we look at future growth and considerations. One of the things to consider to know is the Ontario regulations at 25,000 people. The requirements for our AMP do change for our core asset. So being mindful of that and making sure that we're taking those additional steps as it relates to level of service and information that we need to include within it. Also being mindful of climate change and impacts, not only the designs that we're doing, how we're doing the maintenance, how we're doing our operations, and being mindful of that as we move forward with our role, with our asset management plans. And then, again, reviewing our levels of service and adjusting them as required as a means from that sustainability and from the climate change. Next slide, please. So improvement actions and decision-making inputs into the process. It's important to note that the asset management, as Terry noted, the asset management plan is a big part of the budget process, but it also has a strong correlation with our water rate and financial plans, the master servicing plans, updating our 10-year capital. We also have a number, when you read the report, you'll see opportunities for improvements or areas for improvement, and a number of those we already have on the go. So last month we brought forward the award for the water and storm GIS, AMP database enhancements. We've done improvements to the sanitary sewer GIS as part of our condition assessment. We're looking at incorporating laterals and updated condition assessments. In July, we're going to be bringing forward the road needs study updates. As Terry noted, the data management plan, Sean's been working on that, and we're working closely with him to bring that forward from a corporate, but then also from the core asset perspective. We're regularly meeting with planning to discuss growth and development and how we can make sure that our infrastructure is ready for that, and monitoring our market trends and construction pricing so that we're making sure that our 10-year plans and the information within the AMPs is continuously updated to give a full picture of what is to come. Next slide, please. And then, again, for our planned continued enhancement, this is where we address the increasing data maturity and confidence, where those GIS programs are coming into, the integration with Esri GIS, so that when our staff go out there and they're doing the work, that they have the information in front of them and can get there quickly. They know exactly where it is and be able to make the repairs, and then update that asset register when they do make any repairs is critical. Being able to expand our KPIs and presenting that to council, and continuing to review and implement the reports and continuous through the 10-year asset management plan. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, Bill Blake was unable to attend the meeting today, so I will be going through his slides very quickly as well. I guess that's one of the benefits of working closely together as this committee. So I will, Bill had asked again to thank everyone, to thank the mayor and council for this, and to be able to provide this high-level overview. So if you could go to the next slide. Overall, again, the assets are in decent shape. Noting, again, fleet is the highest value. I'm sure that's not a surprise to anyone. Current asset age is decent overall. Some of them are nearing their end of life, though. And some of the assets listed have been updated in the final AMP plan to more detail. So when it comes to expected useful life fleet, it's broken down to 15 years for the large fleet in the first run, and then the second run fleet will remain at 20, and then a 7-year usage for the smaller fleet items. Next slide, please. This slide provides a visual of the last slide. Again, noting that more than half of the assets are in good to very good condition. 25% are in very poor category. It's mainly fleet within that section, and they've been identified and budgeted for this year and over the next few budget cycles. And on average, the fire assets are 10 years old or younger. Next slide, please. So again, doing a snapshot of the levels of service, providing a 1,000-foot view in this service look as a guide. So again, he noted that good stewardship, careful and responsible management. So the next slide, please. So this looks at, again, from the fire perspective of the risk analysis. So they do have high-risk planning, planning changes in regulations, populations development, looking at that, and the high-risk hazard environments from climate, extreme weather, increased temperatures and wind. These can all result in more fire, wet weather, snow, lake levels, freezing rain, all tie into those higher risk hazard environments. And then from the medium perspective, it's the physical assets. It's the asset failures due to aging or under design. The next slide, please. This covers the risk mitigation plan. So after identifying what the risks, again, we took you take the step back and say, what can you mitigate and how can you impact this? And then at that lens, looking at, and you can see that the overall risks had shifted down. So the mitigations are a benefit, and then you identify how to handle any of those higher or medium risks going forward. Next slide, please. So this provides the capital revenue forecast for the 10-year projection. In 2023, there's a significant spike. This is tied to the new fire station in Vineland and the necessary fleet identified in the 10-year capital plan, which also includes the new ladder truck that's required. Again, capital projects financial forecasts, the new ladder truck and pumper, and required equipment, and it aligns with DC funds from current and future development. Next slide, please. This gives an overview. Oops, sorry. Next slide. Thank you. This provides an overview of the expected operational budget, and they use an estimated 2% increase per annum on the calculation. So from future growth, again, highlighting how quickly we're growing and taking that into consideration when you review that was reflected within some of the risks and some of the other financial costs, and what we need to consider over the next year and beyond, and continuing to review those levels of service and adjust as required with growth. Next slide. So the continued enhancements, these are identified to continue with it not being just a document that's on the shelf, but it's a live document. So continuing to develop the asset management plan and the 10-year capital plans and reviewing that. Since coming on board, the fire service program coordinator has been a much needed asset to utilize a consistent approach and having a one-stop shop that houses all the pertinent data. The fire department has been working with IT and other fire departments to secure a record management system that can do that and be able to ensure that we're continuing to update that. So with that, I'm going to send it back over to Terry to wrap things up. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. That was great. Can I get the next slide, please? So now, as members of council and the public, you may be thinking, so what? I'm not a technician. What am I supposed to do with all of this information? Well, this is a great opportunity to have discussions about asset management with the community. So the asset management plans do contain a lot of information and detail. You can go as in-depth as you'd like, or just stick to the summarized information from the corporate asset management plan. I've provided some questions here that council and the public can use to initiate discussion about infrastructure service levels and expectations. High quality service comes at a high cost. It's staff's duty to make recommendations about what level of service can be provided and what enhancements we suggest. But council determines what we can afford to provide at the property tax level residents are willing to contribute. Next slide. So just to close out, a recap of our primary objectives tonight. We've provided a lot of information for you to take away and digest, but there are no financial or operational impacts to approving the AMPs tonight. The reason we do need to approve them, though, is to meet provincial regulations and continue to receive grant funding. We do look forward to engaging in discussion with all of you about the key priorities for the town of Lincoln. Last slide. Thank you for your time. And now we'll take questions and feedback. Our consultant, Raf, is here from WSP2 if you have any questions for her. So,
okay. Thank you, Terry, and thank you, Jillian, for the presentation. It was very, very informative. I will now turn it over to council. Any questions from council? I see Councillor Brunet is first in the queue.
Thank you, Chair Russell. So through you to either Terry or to the representatives from WSP, I'm trying to understand just what the role WSP has played to get us to this point, to this presentation this evening.
So through the chair, I can go first, and then I don't know if Raf wants to give a little bit of feedback too. We did bring in a consultant when the regulations were first coming out. So one thing I've been saying to everybody is that asset management's not new. We've been doing asset management all along because the asset management is planning for the replacement and improvement of our infrastructure, which is what we do. But asset management as kind of a field is still emerging. So we needed a consultant to help us. We've called it the Asset Management Capacity Building Project. And it's just to bring in some experts to help our staff make sure that we're following the best practices and we're using appropriate methods to do it. Raf, do you want to make a few comments?
Sure. That's a good summary, Terry. As Terry said, you guys do asset management, you did before we came in, but essentially we came in to help Terry and the team put a bit more structure around the asset management approach of the town. So we helped them identify things, for example, that they could improve on, or specific areas that they could change a little bit to be better. And we also helped them comply with the Ontario regulation, and we're continuing to do so. So they're doing a good job.
So through you, Chair, if I could just.
Yeah, actually, Jillian has a comment if you wouldn't mind, Councillor Bernay?
Sure.
Jillian?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think one of the critical items that was missed is, one, WSP brings in expertise. They're definitely a leader in Canada, but not only Canada, but across the world as well. A number of the members of the WSP team have worked in Australia, Australia and New Zealand are considered the leaders in asset management for municipalities across the world. So bringing that information there as well. And they brought us the tool, basically the toolbox to be able to move forward and continue to update and bring these forward. So tools and techniques is also what WSP brought forward as well.
Yeah, I guess I don't like to blow my own trumpet, but yeah, you're right. We do contribute to many of the international standards, and we help Lincoln with tools to further their practices.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So that's great. I'm glad for those responses. I guess I'm just looking at what's happening behind the scenes. Like you're referring to policies, making sure we're meeting all the legislative requirements, and that's great, having those conversations with staff behind the scenes that council's not privy to. But when we look to move forward with this, and when I look at slide 33, and as Terry articulated, that from a council perspective, from a community perspective, these are some of the questions that we can now look at. What is the state of our infrastructure? How well are we meeting the community's expectations? What are the priorities for improvement? Are these some of the things that you are behind the scenes communicating with staff? I guess, when I look at one of the slides, just as an example, what pops up in my mind, I look at the fire slide, and we have 22 pieces of fleet equipment, and the condition is listed as fair. And the average year is 12, and the life expectancy is 17. So are we having a discussion behind the scenes from WSP to give their perspective to staff on something like this as we move forward?
So,
go ahead, Terry.
Through the chair. So I just, so WSP's role is more so to facilitate those conversations for staff to ensure that they have the technical and conceptual understanding of what it is that we're doing. We didn't want to bring in there's some consultants that you bring in and they do all of the assessment for us and then just tell us what our assets are like. We brought WSP in to teach town staff how to do those assessments, how to keep our asset inventories up to date, and how to do the analysis ourselves. So although they're helping us with the analysis, I would say that they're more there to facilitate the conversation and to help staff as the subject matter experts.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Okay. So things are a lot likely to stick if you do it yourself. So as Terry said, yes, we help you and we facilitate conversations and, the general knowledge, but the goal, if the town is to be successful, is doing asset management themselves rather than always just bringing in a consultant to do all of it, give you a report, and then it sits on a shelf and nobody reads it. So that's where we come in to, facilitate this. So in the long run, or maybe even the short run, it's the town that does it rather than us or another consultant.
Thanks, Ralph. Councilor Bernay?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I guess the logical question that I would then pose after hearing these comments, and Terry said, and being on council now for 2 terms, yes, we would all agree that asset management is not new to us. But is this the first time in recent years that we've brought in someone like WSP to give us this information through you, Chair, to Terry?
So through the chair, it's the first time in this kind of capacity that we've brought someone in. But in 2016, we did bring in Public Sector Digest to put together that asset management plan. And although we've been saying that we're improving it, I mean, it was a good asset management plan, and it was very much in line with what other municipalities was doing at the time as well, which is more of the bring a consultant in to tell us how we're doing. We'll get a new one to come back in 5 years. But we just didn't, like Raf was saying, a lot of times with those ones, when the consultant just comes and hands you something, it sits on the desk on a shelf. And we really wanted a more expanded role for town staff. So it's the first time we've brought someone in to do a little bit more of the training on it rather than just doing it ourselves, having them do it for us.
Thank you, Terry. Jillian has a comment.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. The other thing to note is that OREG 588, which is the Ontario regulations that is leading this, it came out in first started to pass through the House in 2017, was a significant change from previous asset management requirements. So it was critical to bring forward, to work with a consultant, again, to bring it in line, more in line with international standards. And was WSP's main role, was to give us the capacity to bring it forward, as was the requirement for 588, that it be a living document and not a document that sits on the shelf anymore, and to also shift it from more of a financial exercise to an actual financial and managing of your assets exercise. So that was the importance of having a consultant like WSP to bring us through this journey and to set us up for success as we go through the further iterations. And again, those milestones that we have to meet as part of OREG 588 for the next steps.
Thank you, Jillian. Councilor Bernay, final comment?
No, that's great, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Bernay. Next up, we have Councilor Pachariva. Councilor Pachariva, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Russell, and through you to Terry and Jillian and Raphael, thank you very much for your presentation. So just a question, and I won't ask you the fire ones because Deputy Chief Blake isn't here, but well, maybe I will. But I'll ask you the infrastructure ones first. So when you showed that chart about pressure reducing valves and it says that the average condition is fair. So are we going to pivot then in our infrastructure renewal and maybe focus on those to get them up to say a good standard?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as I noted on my one slide, a number of the improvement opportunities we already have in the works. So tied to some of this infrastructure, we've already been doing some additional studying and updating of our models to get and testing to have a robust understanding of what valves we need to replace, what valves that we can just do some repairs on. Are they even needed there anymore as our systems changed? So we are looking at that, and we will start to see some pivots. It's also important to note that all of these valves are also within a road network, right? So as we're going into the road and we're doing the upgrades to the infrastructure on those roads, we'd also look at upgrades to those chambers or those valves as needed as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Second one, if I may.
Please go ahead.
Yep. And another one that jumped out at me was sidewalks. So sidewalks is in fair condition. And I mean, we've heard this a lot from residents that, you know, we go out and we identify the trip hazards and we paint them, but we seem to fall behind on actually replacing them. We took a concerted effort a couple years ago, and those are now included in the capital plan. But again, looking, are we going to be attacking this in a more robust nature?
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair, yes. So we do have more information on our sidewalk and looking holistically. We're also out there, staff are out there right now, again, just confirming what the scopes are. Within our 10-year plan, we also have, we are starting to take a focus again of a similar concept to the roads of keep the good roads good, trying to take the same approach with sidewalks. And Frank and Paul are definitely taking the lead on that program, so it's great to see. So we are hoping to, that council will start to see over the next few years of that improvement of no longer just spray painting and then grinding and moving on to something else, of making those replacements as we continue on throughout the years, and making sure that we do have that safe active transportation network in our sidewalks.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. And last question, Chair Russell.
You're
And this is going to go to Raphael. So, and this is one of the questions that's always comes up at budget. So life cycle costing. So the life cycle of a diesel engine vehicle. So, you know, we buy a dump truck that, you know, we drive for a certain amount of time. A diesel engine, if maintained properly, we'll get roughly 1 million miles on it. And then we dispose of our vehicles, and construction company picks them up and then takes full advantage of that. So in this analysis, were we, and knowing, and I'm going to, Councillor Michalak, I'm kind of stealing your thunder, and I hope, you know, I'm going down that route, but knowing there's only one taxpayer, knowing we've got a, you know, an asset management plan that's very thick that identifies a lot of things, have we been able in any way, shape, or form to stretch that life cycle cost, knowing the intersection of the depreciated book value versus the increase in maintenance, and that intersection point, in theory, tells you should dispose of that asset. So just wondering if we've been able to move that graph along the, is it the X axis as opposed to the Y? It's been a long time since
X.
Is it? Okay.
Can I answer, or are you done the question?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, please.
Oh, he's done.
Okay.
Please go ahead, Raph.
Okay. So for the fire, it's a little bit special or different, if you want, because a lot of the lives are dictated by regulation. So sure, in theory, a truck could last a lot longer, but regulations say it has to last X years, and then after that, you get rid of it or you sell it to somebody else. So I think for the fire, we're a little bit restricted. But for the other assets, so the right-of-way or the utilities, we definitely worked with Jillian and company to look at, okay, in theory, how long does things last, and how long do you make them last at the town? And, you know, what if you increase a bit of your maintenance? How does that impact it? So we looked at the most likely useful life that all the different assets could achieve if appropriate maintenance was done, and so on. So for fire, it's regulated, so there's not a lot of play, but for the assets, I would say, yes, for sure.
Thanks, Raph. Jillian also has a comment.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I guess it's important to note as well from our larger fleet perspective, and I can speak to the right-of-way as well, but more specifically for trucks. So we have to take into account that when we have downtime on any of our fleet, we have critical response times that we have to get. So we have minimum maintenance standards that we have to meet. So we went into the struggle this year with COVID and delayed delivery on some of our trucks. So we did have some trucks past what we would typically have for the extended or the expected life. I have to give kudos to our mechanics for keeping our trucks or turning around very quickly to get our trucks back on the road. it was a struggle this year with the maintenance, and we did see increased costs within our fleet maintenance. Because we did have older fleet that we weren't anticipating. So again, it's that cost trade-off that you have to consider of, do you keep the truck longer but then have additional maintenance costs tied to it, and making sure that we're meeting our minimum maintenance standards and those aren't being impacted. And then from it's again about levels of service with the rest of our infrastructure that might not be that's buried or within the right of way, of taking into account that trade-off again of your maintenance costs, thinking about water mains, right? If you try to extend that life, you end up in a situation where you may be having a lot of breaks to repair and the costs associated with that and the water loss and everything like that. So it's considering that, and I know that Raf and I had a number of conversations over the past couple of years about both the right-of-way and the utility amps with those considerations.
Thanks, Julian. Councillor Patriva?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, no, we're reminded by the chief about the regulations with respect to fire equipment, and I agree with Jillian on the underground infrastructure. You don't want to play with that, but it's, we have the biggest discussions over my terms at council, when we look at tractors and, things like that, diesel, like pickup trucks. So those are the things I was more looking at. If it, just because it gets to the point of a number that's 20, as long as, say, if the life cycle cost is 20 years, but you're still below that maintenance, that you have an exception that you're able to, get another thing out of that, because you don't want it, to end up biting you in the backside. So, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Patrick, and thanks for those answers. I know I'll sleep better knowing which access point that was plotted on. Councillor Mikulik, you're up next.
Thank you very much, Chair Russell. Through you to Raphael and Terry, thank you for the presentation, the information. There's plenty there. Following up a little bit on what Councillor Brunet had brought up, would there be, especially now that most or all municipalities have to go through this exercise, would it be beneficial for us as a municipality to possibly retain asset management appraisal specialists to tell us what our assets are worth? And the reason why I ask is because through my life, I've always met people where one man's or one woman's perception of what's junk could be different from what another person's perception or idea of what's junk, or vice versa, what's good. Should we or other municipalities be considering retaining third-party analysis?
Thank you, Councillor Mikulik. I see Terry has her hand up. Go ahead, Terry.
Thank you very much. So through you, Chair, we certainly should. So part of the asset management plan the asset management plan documents themselves is just the documentation of everything else that we do. The actual, and it contains a lot of different parts too. There's the risk, the life cycle costs, all of those, in addition to the condition assessment. We've broken them up into service area asset management plans so that each department can get a unique specialist if they need to for their category of assets. So instead of retaining one firm that can do everything, it's a little more specialized. So the best example is roads. We do a road needs assessment, I believe every 2 or 5 years, but we look for we put an RFP out for it, get them to come in, do all of the assessment, evaluate the analysis that they give back to us, and then we make our planning to go forward. What we would then do is incorporate the work that road needs study has done into our asset management plan to bring it back to the next update on it too. Now WSP does have a lot of specialists and they do work with a large number of municipalities to do these kind of assessments. So they definitely also sometimes come in and help us with those things as well. But you definitely do want a specialist sometimes when you're doing that condition assessment.
Thank you very much for that answer. is this something we should be looking at, like doing, pushing ourselves to do every so often? And I just, to reassure staff of what their opinions are, in relation to other municipalities. Say every 2 years, every 3 years, every 4 years.
Oh, we have Jillian with her hand flailing. Jillian, please go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. As you'll see throughout our 10-year capital plans, and just even within this past term, we do complete the condition assessments of our assets. So whether it be the road needs study, again, looking at the sidewalks, we've done the sanitary condition assessments. It's a little bit more difficult from the water side, and that's where we would bring in and have the conversations with REF and have the conversations with our consultants as well for linear costs considerations from that perspective. But as part of our work plans, we do include these condition assessments of our assets, and as part of that, those experts that are doing the condition assessments also have an understanding of what the costs are and providing our updated information into that, and then that again in turn rolls into our asset management plan and rolls into our 10-year capital plans and ultimately the budgets that we bring forward. So we are already working with those experts to ensure that we are using appropriate dollar values. Again, the past couple of years have been tough just with how much costs have fluctuated or increased, I should say. But again, we do already work with those experts that help us move that dial as we need to for our asset costs.
Thanks, Jillian.
And that's with all departments?
Is that back to Jillian?
Yes.
Through Mr. Chair, a number of them would be done through the master servicing plan. I can't speak directly for all departments, but we do work closely with them. And I know Director McKay within the community services, they would do the condition assessments of like their playgrounds. I know they have the facility assessments and things like that, so it would likely be incorporated within theirs as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mikulik. Madam Mayor, you're on tap.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is a great report. It's something you can really get excited about. It's got great information. It's all very relevant. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have Terry and Rafi go to page 16. And then I'm not sure who should answer this question, but I have two questions. And the first question that I think I want to sort out is where cultural assets and cultural infrastructure fit, because I don't see it here. I don't see it as a discrete entity. What can you tell me about the justification for that?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. We have Jillian.
Through you, Chair, the cultural assets would be part of future asset management plans that we'd be bringing forward. As part of the Ontario regulations, we had the core assets, which was the right-of-way, the roads, bridges, culverts, stormwater management, and then the water and sanitary infrastructure. And again, fire was well ahead of what their requirements were. So over the next year or so, we'll be bringing forward the other asset management plans, and the cultural aspects would be incorporated as part of those asset management plans.
Excellent, very good. And my second question, Mr. Chairman, is is on page 16, the 100-year renewal forecast. It's not so much the chart itself, except that I've had people ask me this question. If we have about 335 kilometers of road, about the maximum that I think I've ever seen refurbished, whether it's being, I'm not talking about road rebuilds, I'm just talking about rehabilitation, keeping the good roads good, that 32 kilometers at the absolute max performance is about all we could either afford or even get scheduled with a contractor. And it would take us well over 10 years to reach that. And so, Rafi, from your perspective, where does the issue of viability come into this in terms of the ability of a community to pay and to keep up?
So I guess it's a matter of looking at what you own, what it's worth, how much it's going to cost you to replace it or, you know, refurbish it, rehabilitate it over your forecast. And, you know, that information should guide your tax rate. You know, by the same token, you would ask the community, what kind of level of roads do you want? So if everybody wants a gold-plated road, then yeah, it's going to cost them more. Or if they want less or they don't want to pay as much, then you kind of agree with the community what they're prepared to pay, and then as long as they understand the kind of service they want to. So it's I'm not really sure how to answer your question. It's about managing, you know, the expectation from the community, but also you know, there's the availability of contractors, of material, etc., that also has to come into play.
So were you involved in the risk analysis for roads?
The one presented in the asset management plan?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Have you, in your experience, have you ever seen a community get to a point where the burden of the asset management plan caused them to start thinking about whether or not they are viable as a community?
I mean, not, I guess it's always in the back of people's mind. I mean, everybody thinks they're viable or they want to be viable. That's why they're there. Like, you're not going to all of a sudden shut down a town because you can't provide water anymore, right? You're always going to find a way to mitigate those risks or, you know, find solution to make the services viable. So I guess my answer would be that the asset management plan raises issues and makes town staff or municipality staff aware of them if they weren't, and put, you know, mitigation plans in action.
Thanks, Raf. We have Terry with a comment as well.
Yeah, I just had a little question or a little comment. Not so much around the asset management plan, but there are municipalities out there that face budget pressures and they need to cut services and do all of those kind of things. So, I mean, it has happened where people have to reduce their levy and stuff, but the asset management plans themselves are meant to facilitate the kinds of discussions that you're mentioning right there, to talk to the residents and say, and to give that 100-year projection and say, if we keep on building new roads, it's going to get to this point down here. So asset management planning is really about taking a long-term view and not just a short term of these people want a road, so let's build it. It's more so long-term, how much is this going to cost to the community? What do we have to spend to maintain it? And those kind of things. So those are good conversations to have, and we're hoping the asset management plans will help to facilitate it.
Right. Well, you know, we've seen examples of the asset management plan, Mr. Chairman. Never really complete, of course, because we've been waiting for this one. The flexibility for me is more obvious in this document than I think I've ever seen it before. So I think that you've obviously been doing quite a good job at answering those risk questions and describing the status of the different elements that have been included in here. I'm certainly going to be looking forward to the cultural assets and infrastructure inclusion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and all my questions were answered. It is a great report. I see no further discussion, so I have a motion moved by Councilor Rajema to receive and file a report FN-0622 regarding the 2022 Asset Management Update, and to approve the Corporate Asset Management Plan in Appendix A, and approve the Fire Services Asset Management Plan in Appendix B, and approve the Roads ROW Assessment Asset Management Plan in Appendix C, and approve the Utilities Water and Wastewater Asset Management Plan in Appendix D. I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to call or to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open.
Just a minute.
Thank you. I'm going to close that vote. And that carries, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. There being no additional reports to consider, we have now concluded the General Business and Finance Committee agenda. We will now rotate and allow Councillor and Chair Tony Brunet to assume the chair at this time for the Planning Economic Development Committee agenda. Councillor Brunet.
So good evening. I'm cognizant of the fact that we do have people on the call that have been waiting 3 hours and 20 minutes from a developer, but I'm just wondering what the appetite is for maybe a 5 to 7 minute biological break. Yes, no? Okay, so we're going to break, and if we could re-adjourn at 9:30. Thank you. Okay, so we are now at the Planning and Economic Development portion of our agenda. 9.1, delegations. There are no registered delegations this evening for Planning and Economic Development. So we will jump right into report 9.2. We will consider item 9.2.1, the addition to the Town of Lincoln's Heritage Inventory Registry, 4175 Hickson Street, and report LS 08-22. Do members of council have any questions? I am seeing none. There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Michalak. The council receive report LS-08-22 regarding the addition to the Town of Lincoln's Heritage Inventory Registry, Register 4175 Hickson Street, and that council acknowledge the cultural and heritage value of 4175 Hickson Street in accordance with Section 27(3) of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that council approve the addition of 4175 Hickson Street to the Town of Lincoln Heritage Inventory Register. And I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. I'll now close the vote, and that carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. And could I just make a housekeeping on the report that's in the agenda? It states when it refers to wards affected, it refers to Ward 3. That's a typo. That should be Ward 2. Hickson Street is in Ward 2. If we could have that corrected, that would be great. So we will now consider item 9.2.2, draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment by MHBC Planning for the west side of Highland Park Drive in Beamsville, report PD-25-22. Dave Aston, partner of MHBC Planning, is here remotely to provide a presentation. Please note, Dave, that you have 10 minutes, and please go ahead, and apologize for the delay this evening, but thank you for hanging in there with us.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Brunet, members of committee. I don't think I need 10 minutes. In fact, I was already pared down. I was thinking I may give a 45-minute presentation, but seeing that you guys have really had a long evening this evening with a lot of great information presented, I'll be very brief. We've been working with staff for some time on the application. Since the public meeting, we've worked with staff of the town, the Conservation Authority, and the region to address the last outstanding comments to get us to this evening for draft plan approval, conditions, and zoning approval consideration by committee. I think next slide, please. The lands are designated in the official plan for residential use and have been planned for single detached residential dwellings. Next slide, please. So this just gives an overview of the purpose of the applications. Again, permit the single detached residential similar to the zoning in the adjacent residential plan of subdivision, the Vista Ridge subdivision, and to zone the non-developable areas or the open space and hazard areas as environmental conservation. And those areas have been reviewed and confirmed in the field with the region. Next slide, please. The draft plan of subdivision here, you can see a bulb extension off of Highland Park Road. The draft plan will be integrated through design, including servicing and grading and parking and street lighting and other elements typical of a plan of subdivision with the adjacent lands in Highland Park Road. The work to complete the existing subdivision and the proposed subdivision will be covered off through the detailed conditions that are part of the consideration this evening, and also then implemented through a subdivision agreement. And next slide. As I mentioned, what's proposed is single detached units. This plan gives just a really conceptual idea of how the units would fit onto the bulb and how the units would also front onto Highland Park Drive. Next slide. This slide really just gives an idea of the different type of housing product that's being considered within that area. A mix of 1-story, 2-story. Again, really the market will determine ultimately how those lots are developed. Next slide. So in conclusion, in our opinion, what's being proposed is consistent with PPS and conforming to the growth plan and the regional plan and the town's official plan. What's being proposed addresses the requirements under the Planning Act for creation of lots through plan to subdivision. And the proposed zoning and proposed approval and conditions of approval we believe are appropriate, and we'll be working with town staff and addressing the details of those conditions should the applications be supported this evening and ultimately approved at council. That's all I have for this evening, but happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Mr. Aston. So just for clarification, we will be going to a vote here to accept the presentation, and then we will discuss the report. So do members of council have any questions for the presenter, specifically for the presentation? Mayor Easton.
Mr. Aston, my question goes back to when this particular part of the property was originally under discussion. And you made reference tonight to the environmental impact study, I believe, and also the treed area that is to be kept completely separate from the development, correct?
Through Mr. Chair to Mayor Easton, yes, the extent of the natural feature open space area was delineated, so that looked at kind of the drip line natural area and then the slope lands. And so that established ultimately that open space area. There is a condition proposed that still requires the completion of a tree management plan. So once we move on into the details and have more information on the grading, there will be additional detail associated with a tree management plan.
Okay, and that's exactly where I was going, so thank you very much for doing that. Because, and I don't mean to put any responsibility on your shoulders for other people's behavior, but when trees are cut down early on a Sunday morning or late on a Saturday night, it doesn't sit too well with the councilors, and it certainly goes against the amount of time and effort that we've put into a tree management plan, not only in Lincoln, but also across the region as well. So who's going to be responsible for making sure that there aren't any there isn't any contrary behavior in terms of either of those bylaws?
Mr. Chair, through to the mayor, I'll certainly pass this information along to our client and share your comments with them. And then I think also, no, I'm not sure if town staff visit the sites or whatever the case may be, but I'll certainly make sure that our clients are aware of the comments and that there's a process that's been established moving forward, and that's what we need to be following.
Okay, well, I thank you for your comments. I'll ask the staff that question a little bit later. Thanks very much, Mr. Aston. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm now going to go to Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. In terms of grading, again, if I recall, that area's got a significant slope to it heading back to that environmental area in the back. What's the impact going to be for grading in that property as you develop this out?
Yeah, through Mr. Chair to Councillor Russell. Details associated with grading will fall out of the conditions where a detailed grading plan would be required. But ultimately, what's been determined as the slope or the stable slope through the Slope Stability Study and Conservation Authority, that will be a no development area. So no grading will extend beyond that stable slope. And so everything will be graded kind of from that environmental area, I'd say back toward the Highland Park Drive.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Pachiriva that Council receive and file as information the following presentation regarding item 9.2.2, the draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment by MHBC Planning for the West Side Highland Park Drive in Beamsville. And I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. I'll now close the vote. And that carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. We will now consider report PD-25-22 for the draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment by MHBC Planning for West Side Highland Park Drive in Beamsville. Do members of council have any questions? Mayor Easton, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Bruder, if we look at page 618 and 619, there are references on both of these pages that have to do with the geotechnical and the grading plan, as well as sediment control, et cetera. Quite an extensive iteration here, as well as 1.5 meter high chain link fence. Mr. Bruder, would you, through the chair, would you please explain what the detail here is trying to achieve? And I'm speaking specifically about some incidences that we had in other parts of, I guess I'm specifically talking about what happened on Lincoln Avenue, where an entire grove of mature trees was removed without permission, and I certainly don't want to see that happen again on this site. Could you speak to this issue and the kind of restrictions and penalties, if there are any, that will be brought forward if necessary?
Director Bruder?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the mayor. Yeah, so that I think what you're speaking about is some of the additional provisions we added to our site alteration and fill bylaw that speak to tree protection. And really, in this situation, what the focus is on vacant lands that are, within urban areas and are potential for redevelopment, this being one of them. And what we require now, before any tree clearing occurs, is we have conditions where we need both a tree inventory done. It identifies tree species of a certain height, their health, and their species and all those things. It needs to be done by an arborist, which is noted in the bylaw. And then what happens then is, once we have that inventory in place, and this needs to happen prior to removals, then we can go ahead and inform our tree replanting and management plan that Mr. Aston was referencing as we go through the detailed design, just acknowledging that some aspects of design will influence how the replanting can be implemented moving forward. So those are some key steps. They're also, in this specific case, they're conditions, I think, that you were referring to from the results of the environmental impact study that require fencing in the rear yards, Again, having a tree protection plan in place, and that's also reflected in our conditions of draft approval. So there's multiple ways that we cover these provisions as we move forward into detailed design, and staff have been clear already with the applicant that these are the case. If you'll recall, there was a previous development proposed here, and these stipulations were identified at that time too, so they're being carried forward now. I hope that answers your question.
It's very helpful, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I do believe that, so it sounds like the arborist is going to have the final word, or at least make the final recommendations. I think as long as the arborist understands that council has an expectation that there be a stringent accountability, it's not just a matter of giving everything a pass, but really, you know, being able to, if necessary, come forward and give a complete review of the quality of the trees that are on the site, so that we're just not going forward and saying we've checked off the box. Do you think that's going to be well understood, Mr. Bruder?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely, and we'll see that it is.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to go to Councillor Russell.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Bruder. Ooh, I just lost my page. On page 15 of 17 on the report, where it references the slope stability study and environmental impact study. In both comments under there, it says that the impact study was generally supportive of the application. Can you just clarify what that means and what wasn't, as part of that impact study, what was not supportive of it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think, you know, I wouldn't, maybe the choice of words there could have been a little better. I think when we said generally, it means that, yes, you know, the development was identified as being able to proceed, but there were mitigation items that were identified that we just spoke about here. So I think that's what we were more speaking to, was that, yes, the development's being supported, but there are some measures that need to be taken.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bruder. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Patriva.
Thank you, Chair Bernay, and a question to Mr. Bruder. So, Matt, you've been out there personally where we've experienced water issues with the other parts of the subdivision, and having been up there on the weekend and noticing that the site was being used for storage of soil that's now been removed to go to the other homes as topsoil before sod's laid. What special concerns are going to take place to ensure that the five homes that are fronting on Highland Park Drive aren't impacted by the homes on the cul-de-sac with respect to drainage and water, you know, going from a higher elevation to down? Because we've seen it in the past, and if it's not done properly, it's a recipe for disaster. So just curious on your thoughts on that.
Sure.
Director Bruder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the councillor. Yep, good question for sure. As you know, whenever we go through considering these developments, we have to make sure that neighbors aren't adversely affected by drainage. That's a building code provision, but one we always implement throughout from preliminary to detailed design. Here in this case, we've got holding provisions on the zoning that speak to some of this too, how we can, because we want to make sure we properly assess it in detailed design and make sure that you know, post-condition flows are limited to a precondition. So, you know, controlling the rate and volume of stormwater as it leaves the site. There is, from a preliminary level, there's capacity at the Grandview Heights and Vista Ridge Pond, but we just need to make sure from a detailed design perspective, we manage it in terms of how it gets there and at what volumes. So that work will continue through detailed design. We know that there's feasibility. We just have to make sure that we properly implement a design that obviously takes into account those neighboring properties.
Okay. And then one more, if I may,
Go right ahead.
Chair Bernay. Yeah, again to Mr. Bruder. So Mr. Aston had identified that he'd been working with the region on the tree analysis. When we had walked that site previously, the other issue was top of bank. So has the NPCA been involved to identify the top of bank, and that's specifically will be demarcated and the fencing go there to make sure that that's preserved? Because previously, it was hazy.
Yeah, good question through you, Mr. Chair. The answer to that is yes. There's been some slope stability assessment done already. There's been the staking of the site. The NPCA has been involved. They're good with the slope stability assessment at this point, so it has been clarified, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Bernay.
Thank you, Councillor Patriva, and I'm going to go to Councillor Mikulak.
Thank you, Chair Brune. Through you to staff. Looking at Appendix C of Report PD 2522, there's roads, and there's item 7 that on-street parking spaces be provided for a minimum of 40% of the total number of units within the subdivision for the units to be a development for single detached homes. How does this differ from a townhouse development? What's the difference between the parking requirements from this development to a townhouse development?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that requirement there is something that was identified for the Vista Ridge subdivision as a whole. So really this was carrying it forward just because this is going to be interacting with and connecting to the overall subdivision. A little bit different from it would depend. The townhouse developments within Vista Ridge that we were looking at the same provision. But generally this was something that was added as part of the subdivision planning stages, that 40% visitor parking requirement.
Okay, thank you. So this is more or less in keeping with continuity of the neighborhood?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's right. We wanted to make sure we carried forward the same principles for the overall subdivision here.
Okay, so it's just parking's always a challenge. I bring this up because parking's always a challenge in any new subdivision, and without knowing what sorts of houses these are going to be, they're going to be detached, or there's going to be families living in these homes, and the garages count for parking spaces, and the driveways count for parking spaces, and now we're asking for, in this development, an additional 40% of parking spaces, and I want to just see how that relates to future developments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to go back to Councillor Patriva. Go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Bernay, and through you, Matt, knowing that we don't allow parking in a cul-de-sac from November the 1st to April the 30th, how are we going to maintain that 40% then?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that's something, that we're going to have to work out a little bit further in detailed design. You know, we have these draft conditions. There is some flexibility in there. Ultimately, staff decides whether or not the intent of these conditions is met. So there's a little bit of flexibility that can be implemented subject to detailed design here. You may be right. We might have to revise our strategy a little bit here, but I think the intention is still to get as much visitor parking as we can when we can here, because I think generally, just based on the feedback we've heard in the area on a high level, that's desired. So we'll be working towards that, but I do appreciate the point. It's something we can carry forward.
Go ahead, Councillor.
No, I was just going to say, and then it's through you, Chair Bernay, and then that brings up that whole discussion on people on cul-de-sacs. So we allow on-street parking with our keep it clear, right? And when there's a snowfall coming, we ask that people don't be on the street. So I think it's now that it's a good time through some analysis, we look at cul-de-sacs because we treat them on a two-tier system. And knowing people that live on them, that's kind of a bugaboo. So now that we have this different policy in place, I think we can look at an overarching view of on-street parking, when it's allowed, when it's not allowed, and move forward with a wholesome and fulsome approach to that. So it's equitable and fair across the municipality. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I just have one question, maybe to the Director of Planning. So when I look at the comments that are coming from Bell Canada on page 14, it reminds me of a number of comments that we heard from residents of Lincoln Estates towards the end with regards to Bell. And I make this comment only because as a ward councillor, Councillor Patriva and I were were inundated at the tail end of the project when I guess their expectations were with regards to Bell, that there would be no overhead wires, that they wouldn't have a pole on their front lawn, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, as a ward councillor, I don't know what communications were given to residents. And I see that this information will be in the report in Appendix C. But I just was wondering through you, Mr. Bruder, and you were obviously involved front and center with those conversations with those landowners and those property owners who were moving in, and then all of a sudden seeing in the 11th hour a pole being, being erected on their front lawn. So I only asked the question so that we could try to eliminate any confusion between the developer. It turns out it's the same developer that we're dealing with this evening. So I just think communication to those landowners, not only from the municipality standpoint, but from the developer, is key as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good question for sure. And I think, when it came to Lincoln Estates, some of the sources of that miscommunication and maybe some confusion were, we had a situation where we had newer roads within a subdivision, which we do require the utilities to be buried. And then we had the existing road being Lincoln Avenue, and there was some, again, miscommunications on how each of those need to be handled. In this specific case with this one, this is totally within a draft planner's, or a plan of subdivision. So as a requirement, as we always do, we will require that the utilities be buried. There won't be any overhead utility.
That's great, and I appreciate that response, but I think it's all about monitoring resident expectations, right? They move into a $1 million house, they've been under the understanding of something, and in the 11th hour, they have a pole on their front lawn. So I appreciate those comments, and hopefully those can be alleviated. So there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Pachariva. Please bear with me, it's fairly lengthy. That council approve zoning bylaw amendment application PLZBA 20220007 in the name of 2410002 Ontario Inc., and be presented to council for approval as outlined in Appendix B. That a H holding provision be placed on the zoning of the lands, and that the H holding provision not be removed until the following conditions have been met. A, the applicant has entered into a subdivision agreement with the town of Lincoln, and the agreement has been registered on title. And B, the applicant addresses on and off-site constraints to the satisfaction of the town of Lincoln. And the council approve the draft plan of subdivision application PLSU B 20220008 in the name of 2410002 Ontario Inc., in accordance with the plan outlined in Appendix A, and in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and the regulations thereunder, subject to the conditions outlined in Appendix C. And that all parties be advised of council's decision on the draft plan of subdivision application in accordance with provincial regulations, noting appeal period is 20 days from the notice of decision. The Director of Planning and Development be authorized to endorse the draft plan as approved 20 days after notice of council's decision has been given, provided that no appeals against the decision have been lodged. That the applicant be advised that draft approval of this plan will lapse 3 years from the date of draft approval unless the town council grants an extension of the approval period. If an extension is requested, an updated review and revisions to the conditions of draft plan may be necessary at that time. The council declare that they have considered all of the written and oral submissions and agrees with the planning report analysis and recommendations, and find that, subject to the conditions of approval, this application meets the Planning Act criteria, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and complies with the growth plan, the Niagara Regional Official Plan, and the town official plan. And that council enact and pass zoning bylaw XX attached as Appendix B of this report to amend the zoning regulations for lands described as part of Block C, Registered Plan 30M-380, and lots 1 through 5, Registered Plan 30M-461 in Beamsville, Ontario, and that council deem that zoning bylaw XX conforms to the official plan for the town of Lincoln. And I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. And I'll now close the vote, and that carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. We are now at confidential items. We have no confidential items this evening. Committee remarks. Do we have any committee remarks? Councillor Rinjima.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to remind everyone that there's two upcoming Lincoln Chamber of Commerce events. Wednesday, June 8th, Business After 5 is at Cave Springs Camp. And Thursday, June 23rd, there's a Business Before 9 at Lincoln Public Library in Vineland.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you.
Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank staff for a very robust agenda. It was a great agenda. A number of reports that we've been looking forward to, and I want to thank all the chairs for really keeping things on track. I mean, it's 10:02. We covered a lot of ground tonight, very important information that will lead us into future decision-making. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I see no further comments. There being no further business, I call this meeting adjourned at 10:02 p.m.